Chapter 2097. The Black Tortoise. 1. Aojia's mouth twitched as he listened to the giant turtle planning its beautiful future. He did not want to hear this nonsense. He wanted to cut this old turtle into pieces. It was too talkative. The old turtle glanced at the impatient Aojia, but did not care. It continued to talk about its ideas. When it got excited, it even stretched out its limbs and gestured on the ground. A day and a night passed and Aojia was drowsy. Finally, Aojia could not take it anymore and fell asleep. The old turtle saw this and pulled Aojia onto its back. As if he was coaxing a child, he carried Aojia on his back and started to turn in circles on the ground. However, Aojia was not aware of the situation. Otherwise, he would be depressed. No one would have thought that they would still be treated like a child at their age. However, they had to admit that after being with the turtle, Aojia's divine power recovered very quickly. He did not even use up any of his divine power. However, for some reason, after being idle for a long time, he actually missed the endless battles from before. Although such a high-intensity battle would exhaust them, it was undeniable that such a battle could stimulate their potential. Perhaps they might not be used to it at the beginning, but after adapting, it would still be very beneficial to them. With this thought in mind, Aojia's desire to escape from Old Tortoise's control became stronger. After being trapped by the old turtle for a long time, Aojia had changed his usual dull mood and started to talk to the old turtle. He was trying to test when the old turtle would let him go. However, the old turtle was very cunning. No matter how Aojia tried to change the topic to leave, the old turtle did not fall for it. This fact had thoroughly dealt a blow to Aojia. He did not expect that the seemingly simple-minded old tortoise was actually like an old fox. What should he do? Aojia was depressed. The hospitable old turtle was worried when it saw that Aojia was getting more and more listless. "Little guy, what's wrong with you? Was it cooked?" In order to liven up the atmosphere, Old Tortoise deliberately made a joke. "You're the one who's been cooked. Your entire family has been cooked." Upon hearing this, Aojia was furious. Looking at Aojia's reaction, the old turtle was a little dumbfounded. It was just joking. Why was the little guy so excited? "Little fellow, could it be that you've really been cooked by someone?" The old turtle guessed with a touch of sympathy in its eyes. "How is that possible?" Aojia roared. "Then what are you so excited about? I was just joking with you." The old turtle said, feeling wronged. Can jokes be made in such a way? In fact, even though he had never been cooked, the elders in the clan had always threatened him with this matter when he was young because he had played too badly. As time went by, this matter had caused a serious trauma in his heart. Otherwise, he would not have reacted so strongly. "I was wrong." Old Tortoise apologized sincerely and said, "Little guy, you won't be angry with me, right?" If you don't want me to be angry, just let me go." After hearing Old Tortoise's words, Aojia had an idea. This was a good opportunity and he had to seize it. After hearing Aojia's request, the old turtle's heart began to struggle. Its face also showed a look of hesitation. After a long while, the old turtle seemed to have made an important decision and said reluctantly, "Hi. All right. As long as you're not angry, I'll let you go." When Aojia heard this, his face immediately revealed a look of joy, but it was only for a moment. Then he confirmed with some worry, "You're serious? You're not allowed to lie to me." "I never lie." The old turtle promised because it was not lying to people, hee. Aojia did not understand the deep meaning behind Old Turtle's words. At this time, his heart was filled with joy and he could not care about anything else. "That's good, quickly let me go," Aojia said impatiently. After he got out, he had to vent all his grievances. Otherwise, he would die of suffocation. "Let's go, little brat." The turtle nodded reluctantly. Then it waved its fat claws. Aojia could clearly feel that the transparent film that was blocking him disappeared. As soon as the thin film disappeared, Aojia was like a bird that was released from its cage. He transformed back into his original form and flew excitedly into the sky. He flew a few rounds in the sky and let out a few loud roars before he transformed back into his human form and landed on the ground. The feeling of being released was great. After doing all this, Aojia waved goodbye to Old Tortoise and left with big strides. However, he had only taken 2 steps when he felt that something was wrong. It was as if something was following him. When he walked, the other party walked. When he stopped, the other party stopped as well. Suddenly, Aojia turned around and met a pair of warm and large eyes. Aojia was so scared that he took a few steps back. Then he looked at the other person in disbelief. Why are you following me? Aojia's heart was palpitating. Was this old turtle planning to leave with him? Woo. He wasn't that little girl Schwer. When did he become so popular with Beastie? The old turtle nodded and said shyly, I can't bear to part with you, little fellow, so I've decided to leave with you. Although I can't bear to leave this place, you're more important. Hearing this, Aojia was not happy at all. He had always wanted to get rid of this old turtle, but now not only did he not get rid of this guy, but he even let it stick to him. What the hell was this? He really wanted to cry. After a long while, Aojia said tearlessly, Old senior, it's not suitable for us to be together. You'd better not pester me. Go and find someone who's willing to accompany you. I'm begging you. But I'm only interested in you. The old turtle blinked its watery eyes and said as if it had been wronged. I'm not interested in you. Aojia almost knelt down in front of the turtle. He didn't know what the turtle saw in him. How did she get entangled with him? Moreover, he was not a human, so he could not let the old turtle recognize him as its master. He also did not know how to take care of people. He was a typical example of one person eating his fill, but the whole family was not hungry. Moreover, he was still freeloading at Schwer's place. If he brought another turtle with him, the consequences would be unimaginable if Schwer got angry and kicked him out as well. It doesn't matter. I believe that as time passes, we will definitely fall in love with each other. The old turtle said indifferently, and a faint smile was revealed in its huge eyes. Aojia sighed again and again. He was helpless and did not know what to do with this stubborn old turtle. It could be said that he had never encountered such a thing in all his life. At this moment, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Then he asked tentatively, I know this is Azure's territory. If I'm not wrong, you're all Azure's illusions, right? If that's the case, it seems like you can't follow me. Chapter 2098. The Black Tortoise, too. Those little guys are the illusions of the master of this place, but I'm not. I'm a beastie like you, but I've been living here since I was a child. I was adopted by the owner of this place. Aojia's words made the old turtle smile calmly. It had finally met a living, real beastie. It could not let this little guy go. Therefore, it was determined to stick to him. If you were adopted by Azure, I wouldn't dare to let you follow me. Aojia pretended to be in a difficult position. It doesn't matter. I'm free. Although the owner of this place has provided me with a place to recuperate, he doesn't care who I follow. I'm still free. The old turtle promised very seriously. But I'm not free. I'm following a little girl now, and can be considered his subordinate. So I really can't bring you along. Aojia brought out Lung Ruoxue. Then I'll also be that little girl's subordinate. I believe that with my strength, she will definitely not refuse. The old turtle said indifferently, Ugh. Upon seeing this, Aojia was at his wit's end. He had said what he needed to say and he really could not think of a better excuse. He had no choice but to let the old turtle follow him. Not long after the depressed Aojia left, he was attacked by the first wave of beasts. The beasts who attacked him actually knew the old turtle and greeted it first. The old turtle also chatted with them happily for a while before the beasts started to attack Aojia. Seeing this, Aojia was speechless. However, he was still very grateful to the beasts that attacked him. He vented his frustration on the unlucky beasts while Old Tortoise found a safe place to watch the show. He dealt with the beasts that attacked him cleanly and glanced at the old turtle, who was drowsy from watching the show. Aojia could not help but twitch his mouth. This old turtle was too casual. Although he had never expected the turtle to help him when he was attacked by beasts, did it have to act so leisurely? He was really envious and jealous. At this moment, the old turtle closed its eyes and said, It's all settled. That's pretty fast. Let's continue our journey. After saying that, the old turtle took the lead and left. Aojia, who was helpless, could only follow behind. Along the way, Aojia encountered more and more beast attacks. However, not only did the old turtle not help him, but it even started to despise him. "Little brat, your speed in battle is not good enough. It's too slow," the old turtle said as he watched the battle. Aojia was so angry that his anger rose to the top of his head. Finally, he could not bear it anymore and shouted, "Why don't you try? Let me see your combat speed." "How can we do that? This is a special training arranged by Senior Tsang for you. Besides, I don't like fighting either, so such a rough thing as fighting should be done by you male beasts." The old turtle shook its head and said, Aojia was so angry at old tortoise's words that he was speechless. "Wait, a male beast? Don't tell me that this turtle is a female." "You're a female?" Aojia's eyes widened as he asked. "Yes, you just realized it? Why are you so stupid?" The old turtle was a little dissatisfied. It thought that the little guy had already known. All right. He admitted that he was stupid, Aojia thought to himself. However, he could not be blamed for this. Beasts like turtles were not common in the immortal realm, and the characteristics of the mother beast were not obvious. How could he recognize it? Seeing Aojia's depression, old turtle smiled and patted Aojia's shoulder. "Little guy, let's go." Just like that, the man and turtle continued to move forward. Time passed. Lung Wuxia and the rest had stayed here for so long that they could no longer tell whether it was morning or night. The sky was getting darker, and there was not much difference between day and night. In fact, on cloudy days, it was as dark as night. Hence, the longer they stayed, the more they did not care whether it was day or night. The more they fought, the less time they had to worry about anything else. Every second, their lives were filled to the brim. The battle had triggered all the killing intent in their bodies. At the same time, they were more focused. After all, if they were not careful, they could be in danger of dying. There was a time when Chengwu was too tired and wanted to lie on the ground and play dead because he had fought too many times. After all, he had a glimmer of hope in his heart. He knew that this was just a special training that Song had given them. Song probably wouldn't put their lives in danger for the sake of his miss. It was because of this thought that he played dead. However, when he laid on the ground without moving, the beastie that had been besieging him did not stop their attacks. Instead, they launched even more fierce attacks. This fact scared him so much that he broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly got up from the ground and threw himself back into the battle. From then on, he did not dare to have any thoughts of being lucky. He could also see that Senior Tsang didn't care about their lives at all. Perhaps this was the true meaning of the special training. The change in mindset and the abandonment of luck in his heart had allowed Chengwu's state of mind to reach a new level. His potential had also been truly stimulated. Furthermore, the current him was like a sword that had just been unsheathed, sharp yet reserved. Not only Chengwu, but the others also gained a lot. Their endurance and battle awareness had all been raised to a new level. The speed at which they absorbed spiritual qi, their mental strength, and their state of mind had also improved at a godly speed. However, their minds were all focused on the battle, so they had not noticed the huge change in themselves. At this moment, the improvement in their mental state made them not feel tired from the frequent battles. In fact, they were filled with hot blood. Uncle Long felt as if he had returned to the days when he fought side by side with his companions. In the past, he had also been so passionate and had fought without caring about anything. He had also thirsted for victory. Now he was reliving everything. He was extremely excited. However, to Uncle Long, the master of the Ning family, and Aojia, they were already reverent god-level cultivators. Their chances of advancing were almost zero. However, they were still very happy that their state of mind and strength had improved. By the time they realized this, they had already left the training ground. Feeling that they had been moved again, the three of them were not used to it at first. After a short rest, the three looked at Song and asked in unison, "How did we leave that place? The special training is over?" "Yes, you can come out now." "What? Have you not stayed long enough?" Azure nodded, but after seeing the three's expressions, he couldn't help but tease them. "I've had enough." Although life there was exciting, their lives could be in danger at any time. The more time passed, the stronger the opponents Song arranged for them became. There were several times when they almost lost their lives. Thinking of those dangerous moments, they still broke out in cold sweat. Therefore, if they could leave the special training place, they really didn't want to stay. Chapter 2099. The Black Tortoise 3. When Song heard this, he laughed out loud and pointed at the screen. You guys can come out now, but they're still suffering inside. When will they come out? Looking at Lung Ruoxue and the rest on the screen, their dirty appearance, and comparing it to their own sorry state, they felt the same way. Sob. It's not easy for everyone. When will they be able to come out? Azure said indifferently. Wouldn't that take a long time? Aojia's sympathy for Lung Ruoxue and the rest was like a torrential river, endless. Furthermore, after he came out, he did not see the old turtle. Instantly, he was in a good mood. He couldn't help but think that he could finally get rid of that old turtle, who liked to watch the fun. At that moment, a voice came from behind Aojia. Little guy, I'm here. When Aojia heard this familiar voice, he started to break out in cold sweat. It couldn't be what he was thinking, right? Oh my God. Why can't you hear my inner voice? Let this old turtle go back to where it came from. He prayed sincerely. However, the heavens ignored his pleas. The old turtle walked behind him and patted Aojia's shoulder with its huge claws as if it was comforting him. Then, the turtle introduced itself to Uncle Long and the master of the Ning family. Hello, you're friends with this little guy, right? Xian, you can call me Aunt Xian. Aunt Xian. Hearing the old turtle's words, Uncle Long and the master of the Ning family were speechless. This old turtle actually asked them to call it Aunt Xian. This. In the blink of an eye, they had another senior in the house, and this senior was obviously provoked by Aojia. In an instant, 2 icy daggers were shot at Aojia. Aojia was so scared that his heart was trembling. He did not dare to turn around because he could foresee how angry Uncle Long and the master of the Ning family would be. However, there were people in this world who liked to take pleasure in others' misfortune. After hearing Xian's words, Azure laughed happily. And it's good to call her Aunt Xian. Good my ass. The three of them couldn't help but curse in their hearts. Their expressions were extremely ugly, and they instantly turned ashen. At this time the evildoer, who had been silent for a moment, opened his mouth and said, You are the Black Tortoise? Yes. The Black Tortoise nodded obediently and lowered its head, not daring to look at the evildoer. Although this handsome man did not seem to be very powerful, he gave it great pressure. Its little heart was trembling all the time. If it had not put its 4 limbs into the turtle shell, it would have trembled. Azure was very clear about the Black Tortoise's fear. He looked at the demon with dissatisfaction and said, Why did you scare it? It's very timid. Timid. The demon raised his eyebrows and looked at Song doubtfully. Then he looked directly at the Black Tortoise, which made the Black Tortoise feel uncomfortable, and his little heart trembled even more. Woo. This is fatal. Who was this person? Why did he give her such a similar feeling to Master Yu? However, he was even more terrifying than Master Yu. Oh. Or it could also be said that the two gave it different feelings. However, it still felt fear. Thinking of this, the Black Tortoise shrank its head and lowered its sense of existence in a self-deceiving way. The evildoer could not help but chuckle when he saw it. This little fellow is quite interesting. It should be the only mystic turtle in the divine realm, right? The demon said with certainty. Yes, I am. Azure nodded. This Black Tortoise was still an egg when it was discovered, and it was also the one who hatched this little fellow. Moreover, a long time ago, the Black Turtle clan was well known in the divine realm. Although they were not among the 4 great king divine beasts, they were once as famous as the 4 great king divine beasts. Compared to the fighting power of the 4 great king divine beasts, the Black Turtle clan was most famous for their defensive ability. However, 1,000,000 years ago, the Black Turtle clan suddenly went extinct for unknown reasons. This was an unsolved case in the divine realm. Even the Divine Master could not find out the reason behind the Black Turtle clan's extinction. And this little turtle was kept in the space it had created. When Uncle Long and the other 2 heard that the turtle in front of them was the Black Turtle, they took a few more glances at it. After all, the Black Turtle clan was once as famous as the 4 great king divine beasts in the divine world. However, they had never seen the real Black Turtle, because when they heard of the glorious deeds of the Black Turtle clan, they had already become a legend in the divine world. Now that they suddenly saw a living Black Turtle, they were even more surprised. After knowing that this turtle was the Black Turtle, they were relieved that the Black Turtle called himself an elder, who asked this turtle to be so much older than them. However, if the demon didn't call this Black Tortoise a little fellow, they would be even happier. But now they had the upper hand. After living for so many years, his seniority was getting lower and lower. No one could accept this, right? As far as the eye could see, groups of elders were calling them little guys when they met. This made them, who had always felt that their seniority was very high, really unable to accept it. However, the divine world had always respected the strong. Thus, although they could not say it out loud, they could still accept it in their hearts. At this moment, Song felt something strange. He glanced at the screen and said in surprise, "There's a little fellow who's about to advance." Upon hearing this, Uncle Long and the others quickly turned to look at the light screen. The person who was about to advance was the first elder, who was covered in wounds and tattered. On the screen, the Grand Elder was lying on the ground. His body was emitting a faint white light, and his face was filled with pain. Then, the Grand Elder's body exploded with a seven-colored light, and the laws of heaven and earth descended. Seeing all this, the master of the Ning family was so excited that he was overjoyed. He had known the Great Elder for many years, and their relationship was even closer than family. He knew that the Great Elder had been stuck at the Divine Emperor level for a long time. Now that old thing was finally going to advance to the Reverent God level. He was sincerely happy for the Great Elder. He could even feel the nervousness in his heart. His eyes were fixed on the light screen without blinking, afraid that the First Elder would act strangely. It was not until the law of heaven and earth disappeared that the master of the Ning family could finally put down his worries. The reason why he was so worried was because the Reverent God level was different from the previous levels. Although the laws of heaven and earth would descend as usual, the Reverent God level contained a soul attack. If one was not careful, they could go berserk and form an inner demon. As a result, being able to become a Reverent God was the greatest test for a divine emperor. Since ancient times, many divine emperors had died while trying to break through. Otherwise, there wouldn't be only a few hundred Reverent God level cultivators in the God realm. Seeing that the Great Elder had completed his advancement, Song directly moved the Great Elder out. When the Great Elder came out and saw the master of the Ning family and the others, he immediately burst into tears and threw himself into the arms of the master of the Ning family, as if he had seen a long-lost family member, and kept sobbing. Seeing this, the Ning family master and the others were all speechless. Ugh! What kind of situation was this? Do you have to be so excited? However, the master of the Ning family could understand the Great Elder and patted his back to comfort him. The master of the Ning family smiled and said, "Old man, congratulations. Hehe. I can't believe that he'll become a Reverent God one day." When the Great Elder realized what embarrassing thing he had done, he immediately jumped out of his old friend's arms, his face full of embarrassment. However, he was really too excited, because he had almost died before advancing. Originally, he had been stuck at the Divine Emperor level for many years, and had not felt the barrier to breaking through. After Tsong's special training, he had experienced many life and death trials. Before breaking through, he had been attacked by his opponents until he was on the verge of death. He had never expected that he, who had thought he would die, would actually break through at the last moment. This fact made him both surprised and happy. Even now, he still felt that it was a bit of a fantasy. However, he knew that this was all thanks to Tsong's special training. Tsong had made him feel the threat of death, which had greatly stimulated his Buddhist potential. He had never felt so close to death before. This feeling was too unforgettable, but he believed that no one would want to experience this feeling again, and he didn't want to. Then he gratefully turned his gaze to Tsong and said, "Tsong, thank you for your special training. No need to thank me. However, your strength is really too low. You actually took so long to beat a few beastie." AI. Blue sighed, clearly dissatisfied with the Grand Elder's performance. When the Grand Elder heard Blue's words, he was even more embarrassed, not knowing what to say. In reality, he wasn't very good at fighting, especially in group battles. If it wasn't for Shue'er's life flame cheating, his battle wouldn't have caught Blue's eyes. However, no matter what, a rank advancement is something worth celebrating. Song continued, finally saying some words of encouragement. At this time, Song exclaimed, there's another little fellow who's about to advance. He exclaimed in surprise. Chapter 2100. The Deceptive Giant 1. This time, the person who was going to advance was Lung Ruhan. Song nodded in satisfaction when he saw this. He thought to himself, Nyo's brother's aptitude is not bad. Maybe I can give him more opportunities to train. With this thought in mind, he began to arrange Lung Ruhan's future training in his heart. However, it was fortunate that Lung Ruhan was still unaware of this. Otherwise, he would be depressed. On the screen, Lung Ruhan's speed of advancement was very fast. After about 15 minutes, he had officially advanced to the Divine Emperor realm. However, Lung Ruhan, who had advanced, was clearly at a loss. She had not expected that she would suddenly advance. After all, this was too unexpected for him. Before the special training, he had never thought that he would be able to advance to the Divine Sovereign realm so quickly. Just like the others, he had been tormented enough and almost lost his life several times. However, his luck was not bad. He was always able to turn danger into safety at the most critical moment. As for his advancement this time, he was also in the middle of a battle. Therefore, he was not mentally prepared at all. Everything seemed to have come naturally and smoothly. After the momentary days of advancing, he suddenly came to his senses. At this moment, his opponent was also a little dumbfounded when he saw his sudden advancement. Lung Ruhan saw this and naturally did not plan to let go of this rare opportunity. After a few powerful attacks, her opponent was turned into ashes. Seeing this, Uncle Long smiled and said to Azure, Senior Song, can Ruhan this brat also come out? Yes. Song nodded, then moved Lung Ruhan to the control room. When Uncle Long and the others saw Lung Ruhan coming out, they quickly congratulated him. Lung Ruhan was also very excited to see them. After exchanging some pleasantries with them, he started to worry about his grandfather and the others who had yet to come out. Sensing Lung Ruhan's thoughts, Song Wei grinned and said, Little brat, you don't have to worry about them. They will come out sooner or later. I've already arranged the next training for you, so you have to work hard. There's more? Hearing this, Lung Ruhan frowned and laughed bitterly in his heart. So Tsang had his eyes on him? He actually arranged training for him again? He had wanted to spend more time with Shue'er, grandfather, and the others, but it seemed like he had no time again. When Uncle Long and the others heard Tsang's words, their hearts skipped a beat. Were they going to continue training? At this moment, Tsang, who also knew what Uncle Long and the others were thinking, smiled and said to them, Little guy, don't be afraid. I want to arrange for you to train together. Hearing Tsang's words, Uncle Long and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, they also sympathized with Lung Ruhan. What a pitiful little fellow. Let's continue training. Receiving the sympathetic gazes from Uncle Long and the others, Lung Ruhan felt even more depressed. Then she could not help but ask, Can I not participate in any training for the time being? No, Azure said without any room for discussion. But I want to spend more time with my family. Lung Ruhan said honestly. Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to spend with your family in the future. As for the current stage, you should still focus on cultivation. The reason why I want to train you is for your own good. After all, you're still too weak. Azure said with a heavy tone. All right then. Lung Ruhan replied helplessly. The gloominess in her heart was also increasing endlessly. He had just advanced one rank and his excitement had not completely faded. However, he was still being said that his strength was too low by Tsang. Sob. This fact had dealt him a blow. However, he had a good mental fortitude and soon adjusted his mentality. Then, like Genius and the others, he turned his eyes to the light screen. After an unknown period of time, Chengwu Lung Qingtian and the others had completed their advancement in rank. They were moved out by Tsang. Although they all looked rather disheveled, the joy of advancing still hung on their faces. When Lung Ruhan saw their excited expressions, she could not bear to tell them that they still had to continue with their training. But he didn't say it, and he wouldn't say it without waiting for others. Song took advantage of their happiness to tell them directly, and arranged other training for them. When Lung Qingtian and the others heard this, they were instantly dumbfounded. Uncle Long, the master of the Ning family, first elder, and Aojia looked at them with sympathy, not knowing how to comfort them. After a long while, Cheng Wu Kai stuttered in disbelief. You still need to train? Yes. Song nodded with certainty, his dark eyes still filled with disdain as he continued. Your current strength is too low, you must train well, and I will definitely train you to become strong fighters like the war gods. Good luck. God of War? Cheng Wu and the rest wanted to cry but had no tears. Could they say that they did not want to become war gods? However, it didn't seem to be of much use. Song would never accept it. Sob. Could it be that they could only accept their fate? Thinking about it, they were really unwilling. However, thinking about how overbearing Song was, they were all a little afraid. Hence, in the end, no one said anything to object. Following that, Lung Qingtian took the initiative to change the topic and asked, why hasn't Shuer come out yet? Niu is still early. The amount of spiritual energy she needs is several times more than you all, so she won't be able to come out for a while. And since you've come out, then have a good rest and continue your training. Azure said after some thought. Can't we continue training after Shuer comes out? Lung Qingtian said pitifully. He had not seen his precious granddaughter for a long time. He missed her so much. Time is money. Niu's grandfather. I'm doing this for your own good. There's still a long way to go. Azure helplessly advised. All right then. Lung Qingtian was helpless as well. However, Song's words were not without reason. Soon after, Lung Qingtian and the others were teleported out of the god-protecting pagoda. When they returned to the courtyard, Lung Qingtian and the others saw Bing Yao, who was looking at Yu Chuan. He was running around in circles in the garden like a headless fly. When he saw them, he immediately ran over and asked, where did you guys go? Where's Shuer? Bing Yao was depressed. Song took everyone in the garden, leaving only him. This fact almost drove him crazy. Moreover, no matter how loudly he shouted, Song, that bad guy, pretended not to hear him and didn't appear at all. When he thought of this, he was so depressed that he wanted to bang his head against the wall. We were taken into the God Protection Tower by Azure for special training. Before we came out, Azure said we have to continue training and let us out to rest. Lung Qingtian explained calmly. Oh, Bing Yao nodded, then widened his eyes. You've all advanced? I only advanced 1 rank. Cheng Wu said gloomily. 1 rank is too little? Bing Yao's eyes widened in anger. These guys really didn't know how lucky they were. It was extremely difficult for others to advance in rank, especially after reaching the God King stage. In order to continue advancing to the God Emperor or Reverent God stage, other than opportunities, all kinds of heavenly resources were indispensable. However, with Shuer and Song's help, these fellows' advancement speed was like a rocket. If this was known by others, wouldn't they die of envy and jealousy? Chapter 2101. The Deceptive Giant 2. Senior Azure said that our strength is still too low. Cheng Wu said in a small voice. He was actually very satisfied, but Senior Song was not. Therefore, they had to continue to work hard. That pervert. In its eyes, there's no one who's strong. Bing Yao's mouth twitched, and he was a little speechless. Cheng Wu and the others didn't know how to respond to this because they knew that Senior Song would definitely hear them. Thus, they could only pretend to be silent. Sir Bing Yao, we'll go back to our room to rest. After a long while, Cheng Wu continued to speak. Then everyone immediately left the garden. In the blink of an eye, Bing Yao was the only one left in the huge garden. Seeing them run faster than rabbits, Bing Yao became even more depressed. He kept thinking in his heart, did he say something wrong? Why did these people seem to be afraid? How could they not be afraid? Bing Yao was talking about Song. Naturally, he couldn't hide the fact that he had said perverted Song. However, Song didn't have the time to care about Bing Yao. All of its attention was on Lung Ruoxue. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue was still in the space created by Song, fighting with the beasts. However, because of the help of her life flame, those beasts did not pose any threat to her at all. But after staying here for a long time, she would get tired of it. And now, she was starting to feel a little frustrated. With her annoyance, the speed of the beasts' deaths became even faster. However, after knowing that those beasts could resurrect after dying, she naturally became unscrupulous when she vented her anger. Lung Ruoxua had killed hordes and hordes of beasts with almost no repetition of the same divine skill. After repeated use, she had mastered the divine skills to the point of perfection. In fact, she had even created a few divine skills of her own. However, the divine skills that she had created all required the support of a large amount of divine power. Hence, other than her, no one else could use them. However, the power of those divine skills was absolutely extraordinary, especially in group attacks. Almost all of them were fatal. One of her favorite skills was named Myriad Phoenix Dance. From the name, it was obvious that it was a divine skill with a fire attribute. The most unique feature of this divine skill was that it was similar to a meteor shower. However, this divine skill released phoenixes. Each phoenix was only the size of a baby's palm, and their bodies were burning with 7 colored flames. They were exceptionally beautiful. After using this godly skill many times, she had become very familiar with it. The beasts here had all been attacked by tens of thousands of dancing phoenix. In the end, the time that the beasts could appear in front of Lung Ruoxua grew longer and longer. In the past, a few waves of beasts could appear in a day. But now, there were times when not a single group of beasts would attack her. This fact left Lung Ruoxua at a loss of whether to laugh or cry. However, she knew that she couldn't blame the beasts. The main reason was that they were afraid of her. It was her fault for killing them whenever she was irritated, and the speed at which those beasts were resurrected clearly could not keep up with the speed at which they were killed. In the long run, she had actually fallen into a situation where she had no beasts to kill. This fact made Uncle Long and the others feel extremely helpless. The fact that Lung Ruoxua was a freak was etched even deeper into their hearts. Especially the Great Elder. As long as he thought of the helplessness and restraint he had when he killed the beasts, and compared it to Shui Er's ease, he had the urge to cry. Woo! It was really infuriating to compare. In the control room, Uncle Long hesitated for a long time before he finally couldn't help but ask, Senior Tsang, is that last Schwer going to continue staying inside like this? He felt that Schwer could come out now. Even Beastie did not dare to appear in front of her, so there was no point for her to continue staying there. I've said it before, you can't come out without breaking through. Azure said somewhat stubbornly. Your useless subordinates don't even dare to show their faces. What's the point of Schwer still staying there? Evildoer sneered at Song's words. From his point of view, this bastard Song wanted to separate him and Schwer. That's why he came up with the special training. Now the special training was no longer meaningful to Schwer. But this bastard still refused to let her out. This was preposterous. They don't dare to show their faces, but don't you still have me? Azure said with a smile. When the demon heard this, he was shocked. He quickly squinted his eyes and asked, What do you mean by that? Damn it. It couldn't be what he was thinking, right? Hehe. It's the literal meaning. Azure laughed complacently before disappearing. When they saw him again, he was already on the screen. After that, they watched as Tsang Huan turned into a small snow-white rabbit and bounced towards Lung Ruoxua's direction. Instantly, everyone was speechless, and the demon's face gradually darkened. Song arrived in front of Lung Ruoxua very quickly and sat down. At this moment, Lung Ruoxua was preparing dinner for herself. When she saw the rabbit in front of her, she was stunned for a moment before saying, You're offering yourself to me for dinner? No. Song shook his head. His nose couldn't help but take in a breath of the delicious food floating out of the pot. Could it be that he's here to pick up food? Lung Ruoxua was speechless. She could not understand why a little beast that she had conjured would want to eat. The wolf that he had met the first time was a foodie, and this rabbit seemed to be one too. Hehe. You're right. Azure laughed. You are. Song. Lung Ruoxua probed when she heard his tone. How did you know? Azure was a bit surprised. He didn't think that Neo would still recognize him even after he turned into a rabbit. This wasn't easy to handle. However, how did Neo recognize it? One had to know that it had already concealed its aura. Your tone of voice hasn't changed. Lung Ruoxia's forehead was full of black lines. She didn't know what Song wanted to do by turning into a rabbit and running in front of her. He couldn't be here to play hide and seek with her, right? Oh, Blue was a little depressed when he heard this. He didn't expect that his tone would expose him. But it didn't matter. Since he had been exposed, he would think of other ways. Song, why did you come in? Lung Ruoxia continued to ask. I originally came in to accompany you in your special training, but Neo's flames are too terrifying. Even the beastie I conjured is afraid. However, since you've recognized me, I can't be your sparring partner anymore. Azure spread out his little claws and said helplessly, what else do you plan to do? Lung Ruoxia asked out of curiosity. She had been idle for at least 3 days, right? Not a single beastie came to find trouble with her. This fact made her rather speechless, and even made her often wonder if she was really that terrifying. I'm going to upgrade your special training. To tell the truth, this was also a last-minute decision. How do I upgrade it? Lung Ruoxia was very surprised. Was Song planning to reveal his trump card? Chapter 2102. The Deceptive Giant 3. You'll know after I finish this meal. Cold stared at the fresh food. Hearing this, Lung Ruoxia felt even more helpless. However, she still took the initiative to hand the dishes to that little foodie, Song. Song also ate without any reservations. After eating and drinking to its heart's content, Song laid in Lung Ruoxia's arms with its limbs spread wide open. It burped comfortably and Lung Ruoxia was at a loss for words when she saw its current state. As for evildoer who could see Song's every move through the light screen, he was so angry that his face turned black and dark clouds gathered. The cold air on his body could instantly freeze people into ice sculptures. Uncle Long and the others, who felt the chill, couldn't help but keep a safe distance from him so that they wouldn't be affected. When Dang Song had rested enough, he had an idea and left with Lung Ruoxia. Moments later, Lung Ruoxia moved to another location. This time, she was no longer in the forest. She had arrived at a room. That room was like a secret chamber. There was no wind on all 4 sides. There were no decorations in the room or on the walls. It looked rather simple. However, Lung Ruoxia did not think that this room would be as ordinary as it looked. She was very clear that Song would not bring her to a place where she was not of much use. Where is this place? Lung Ruoxia glanced at Song and asked calmly. This is the training room. Azure laughed. What trial? Lung Ruoxia's curiosity was piqued. Anything is fine. Girl, you can continue your special training here from now on. The opponents here are very strong. Azure said with a mysterious expression. Very strong? How strong are they? Lung Ruoxia didn't understand. The opponents in the forest she was in previously weren't weak either, right? She often encountered godly venerable rank beasts. However, when Song heard Lung Ruoxia's question, he only smiled and didn't reply. Then he snuggled into Lung Ruoxia's arms before leaving reluctantly. After Song left, she was the only one left in the empty room. Lung Ruoxia stood there in boredom, but her heart was thinking about what would be here. At this moment, Lung Ruoxia felt a distortion in space not far away from her. She looked up and saw a giant with yellow skin that was tens of meters tall appear in front of her. Not only was this giant tall and big, but his body was also very strong. His waist alone could fit at least 5 Lung Ruoxias. His eyes were even bigger than copper bells. However, the giant was expressionless as he crossed his arms and looked down at Lung Ruoxia. As for the giant's strength, it was only at the level of a god king. After Lung Ruoxia observed for a while, the questions in her heart grew. The giant's strength left her even more puzzled. Azure knew how powerful her flames were, so why did she create someone with the same strength as her? She didn't quite understand Song's meaning. Just as Lung Ruoxia was at a loss, the giant finally spoke. I'll be your sparring partner from now on. You have to defeat me in order to have the chance to challenge higher level trials. I know. A long sword appeared in her hand. The sword was emitting a frightful cold chi. When the giant saw this, he did not even bat an eyelid. In that instant, Lung Ruoxue made her move. A loud and clear phoenix cry suddenly rang out. The sword chi that was infused with fire attribute divine power was like a fiery red phoenix that was ready to fire. After circling a few times in the air, it pounced at the giant. However, the giant didn't move at all, nor did it seem like it was going to defend itself. It just stood there quietly, waiting for the phoenix to arrive. Seeing this, the phoenix blinked its lively red eyes. Then with a whoosh, it went straight through the giant's body. In an instant, the giant's body was ignited with a monstrous flame. However, the flame was quickly extinguished. The giant's body was intact. Not even a scar could be found. What was going on? Lung Ruoxue was shocked. She had also injected her natal flames into her sword earlier. However, her flames did not seem to cause any harm to the giant. This was simply too unbelievable. Her flames, which had always been successful, had also failed at their first attempt. This fact made her not dare to take this giant lightly. Following that, Lung Ruoxue continuously struck out with her sword. Every single strike landed accurately on the giant's body. Unfortunately, just like before, she was unable to cause any damage to the giant. Lung Ruoxue was depressed. What kind of monster was this? Why wasn't her life flame useful anymore? At this moment, the giant's body started to glow with a faint light. Lung Ruoxue was confused and tried to swing her sword again. However, in that instant, the sword she had swung was reflected back on her body. At that moment, she felt a metallic taste in her throat, and the pain in her internal organs was unbearable. Lung Ruoxue knew that she was injured. She quickly took out a healing pill and ate it. Then she continued to attack. However, all of her attacks were reflected back at her, and the pain that got worse and worse almost made her faint. Sensing that something was amiss, Lung Ruoxue swallowed another pill and stopped her attacks temporarily. Then her beautiful eyes started sizing up the giant. After observing for a long time, she still couldn't tell what the giant was made of, whether it was a real person or an illusion. However, she already knew the giant's strength, which was that any of her attacks were ineffective against him. Not only that, but the giant could also reflect her attacks. Therefore, no matter how many attacks she attacked, she would still hit herself. This was really too depressing. If this continued, how were they going to fight? Lung Ruoxue racked her brains for a long time, but she still could not think of a way to hurt the giant. Now she finally knew why Azure let this guy out. He even asked her to beat him. However, how could he defeat someone who was not afraid of any attack and could even reflect it? Just as Lung Ruoxue was at her wit's end, Uncle Long and the others were equally dumbfounded when they saw the giant through the light screen. What was this thing? They were very clear about the strength of Shui-Er's abnormal flame, but now Shui-Er could not do anything about it. This was truly unbelievable. The demon turned his head and glanced at Song, saying indifferently, "To think that you could think of such a method. Are you planning to let Shui-Er stay inside forever?" The demon was a little unhappy. Uncle Long and the others might not know the giant's origin, but he knew that the giant was the guard of the God-protecting tower. They were born together with the God-protecting tower spirit. Besides protecting the God-protecting tower, their other purpose was to train. Therefore, the giant could be considered a product of chaos. Not only was it not afraid of the chaos divine fire, but it was also impossible to deal with it with conventional methods. Moreover, there was a certain rule to defeating the giant. Brute force or normal attacks would not work. To put it bluntly, if one wanted to defeat the giant, they had to rely on wisdom. In addition, as far as he knew, no one had been able to defeat this giant so far. As for whether Shui-Er could defeat it, it would depend on whether she could find the giant's weakness. He couldn't help much in this regard. Moreover, seeing Shui-Er getting injured in succession, his heart ached, and his gaze towards Song became even more unfriendly. However, Song didn't care about the daggers in his eyes. Instead, he said provocatively, "I believe that Niu will think of a way. Don't you have confidence in Niu?" "Of course I'm confident." Hearing these words, the demon gritted his teeth. In his heart, he wished he could chop this hateful Song into 8 pieces. However, from the looks of it, He was afraid that he would not have the chance. Therefore, he felt a little aggrieved. Since you're so confident, then just wait. That's right, I have to send Nyo's grandfather and the others to continue their training. Azure seemed to have suddenly thought of this and disappeared after speaking. Seeing the obviously guilty Tsang leave with an excuse, the evildoer was even more furious. Uncle Long and the others expressed their deep sympathy for Lung Qingtian and the others. However, the person who was most worthy of sympathy now was Lung Ruoxue. The giant was too tall, so when she looked up for a while, she felt her shoulders and neck ache. Helplessly, she could only float in the air and barely meet the giant's eyes. The giant also seemed to not see her movements and was very calm. Can I ask you a question? Lung Ruoxue tried to probe. We can't. The giant said coldly. His refusal was very straightforward. Then can you tell me what you are? Lung Ruoxue changed her way of speaking and continued to ask. No comment. The giant's answer was simple and clean, without any hesitation. However, when Lung Ruoxue heard this, she was extremely depressed. This was because this giant was simply too uncooperative. Sop. Her inner villain was already filled with anger. This giant was too much of a scam, wasn't it? You just injured me. Lung Ruoxue complained, feeling wronged. I didn't even make a move. That was your own attack. The giant spoke the truth, not willing to be the scapegoat at all. When Lung Ruoxue heard the giant's honest words, she choked and almost passed out. Wasn't this rebelling? She had always been the one to anger others, but today, she was the one being angered. Giant, what are you trying to do? Can't you just cooperate and answer properly? Chapter 2103. The Battle with the Three Giant Brothers 1. Lung Ruoxue's heart was filled with all sorts of anger, helplessness, and, all in all, she finally understood what it meant to anger someone to death. This tall giant in front of her was like a piece of meat that couldn't be cut. No matter how sharp her blade was, she couldn't do anything to him. With such self-awareness, Lung Ruoxue dejectedly squatted at the corner of the wall and drew circles, cursing him. When the giant saw Lung Ruoxue's state, he remained unmoving and calm as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue became even more depressed. Ai. How could he hurt this giant? She didn't dare to attack the giant easily anymore. Otherwise, she would be the one being hit every time. Even if she had a body of steel, she wouldn't be able to withstand that kind of torment. After thinking for a long time, Lung Ruoxue still couldn't come up with a solution. However, even though she had her head lowered, she had been secretly observing from the corner of her eyes. The giant stood very straight, and his eyes were always looking straight ahead, without slanting at all, as if he had been specially trained. In the end, she decided not to waste her time thinking about it. She took out a recliner and lay on it. There was a small table beside the recliner, which was filled with all kinds of food, desserts, and fruits. She began to eat them slowly. Uncle Long and the others were dumbfounded when they saw this scene from the control room. What was Schwer doing? Why is he eating? However, seeing her eating so happily, they were all a little greedy. The black tortoise said to Audiobook directly, "Little guy, I want to eat those things too. Make some for me. I don't know how to do it." Audiobook gritted his teeth, but his answer was despised by the black tortoise. The black tortoise said disappointedly, "Ai. In this day and age, a man who couldn't cook was not a good man. As a man, you must be able to go to the hall, work in the kitchen, work without complaint, and do everything you want. You're not qualified." The black turtle's words made Uncle Long and the others' foreheads full of black lines. They all sighed in their hearts. According to the old turtle, they were all not good men? What kind of theory was that? They were not convinced. At the thought of this, they glared at the culprit. However, the old turtle could not understand their inner thoughts. Even if it did, it would not care. However, it looked at Audiobook with more and more sympathy and disappointment, which made Audiobook nervous. Uncle Dragon and the others did not look friendly either. Audiobook, who could not bear it any longer, surrendered under the double pressure of the old turtle, Uncle Dragon, and the others. He took out his precious food and placed it in front of the old turtle. Seeing this, the old turtle nodded in satisfaction, and then began to eat. Soon, the turtle finished eating and stared at Aogia. I don't have any more, I've given them all to you. Aogia spread his hands and said helplessly. But Old Tortoise's disbelieving look made him so depressed that he wanted to scratch the wall. Was his credibility that low? Ai. If there's no, then there's no. I didn't expect to be full. The old turtle said after a long while after hearing Aogia's words. There was still a faint mist in its huge eyes, and it looked as pitiful as it could be. Furthermore, other than looking at Aogia with such a gaze, it also targeted Uncle Dragon and the rest. In the end, Uncle Dragon and the rest felt uncomfortable under its gaze, and had to rummage through their storage rings to see if there was any ready-made food for it. Finally, the old turtle was satisfied. At the same time, the giant who was confronting Lung Ruoxua finally showed some reaction when he saw Lung Ruoxua take out a pile of fragrant food. What are you eating? The giant asked. No comment. The narrow-minded Lung Ruoxua also replied. Then you can at least tell me where you got this thing, right? The giant asked, unwilling to give up. I made it myself. Lung Ruoxua said honestly. How can I have a taste of it? The giant asked. What, you can eat too? Lung Ruoxua asked with a smile. Of course I can, but I've never eaten anything before. The giant was very honest, and there was a rare shyness on his stiff face. In this way, he looked more lovely. You're really pitiful. How about this, let's make a deal. I'll get you food, and you'll tell me everything about this training room, including you. How is it? Lung Ruoxua said with a smile. The expression on her face was clearly that of a big bad wolf trying to abduct a little white rabbit. However, the giant started to think about it seriously. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxua did not disturb him. However, she was secretly laughing in her heart. It seemed like using food as bait was the right thing to do, and she was most skilled in kidnapping. She didn't believe that any human or beast wouldn't be tempted by the food she made, although she didn't know what this guy was. However, as long as he could eat, he would definitely not be able to escape. Sure enough, the giant, who had been thinking for a long time, compromised and agreed. He saw that the food on the table was decreasing little by little. If he didn't agree, he would have no share of these nice-smelling things. From this, it could be seen how great the temptation of delicious food was. For the sake of delicious food, he could even give up his unspeakable principle. Seeing that he had agreed, Lung Ruoxua was naturally not going to be stingy. After she invited the giant to sit beside her, Lung Ruoxua enthusiastically placed food into his hands. However, the food in front of her was clearly not enough to fill the gaps between the giant's teeth. Hence, she took out even more food that she had prepared earlier. Giant's face lit up when he saw this. Then he began to tell Lung Ruoxua everything that had happened as he ate. From the giant's words, Lung Ruoxua found out that this place was just as Tsang had said. They could do any kind of trial as long as Tsang could think of it. All the trials would be conducted here. The giant in front of him was Tsang's guard. He was Tsang's companion. His purpose here was naturally to create obstacles for the trial takers. In addition, the giant also said that he was not Tsang's only guard. He was also the weakest of all the guards. After hearing this, Lung Ruoxua was so depressed that she wanted to scratch the wall. This fellow was the weakest, and she couldn't even deal with him. If it was someone stronger, what would she do? Could it be that Tsang was planning to let him stay here forever? No. This was absolutely not allowed. She still had a lot of things to do. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxua asked again. By the way, do you have any weaknesses? In other words, she was asking how she could defeat them. However, she would not ask so directly. Weakness? We have no weakness. The giant frowned as he thought. How is this possible? This answer made Lung Ruoxua so depressed that she almost vomited blood. However, when she saw the giant's blank expression, she knew that the giant was speaking the truth. Chapter 2104. The battle with the three giant brothers, too. I really didn't. We're invulnerable to weapons, water and fire, and we can't die. So, I don't know what weaknesses I have. However, you can take your time to search for it. The giant laughed as he consoled her. In reality, he didn't tell her everything. However, he wouldn't reveal everything to Lung Ruoxua. Slowly search? How long would he have to find it? Lung Ruoxue was a little anxious and tried to negotiate. I also want to look for it slowly, but my time is very tight. I really don't have that much time. Why don't you just tell me directly how I can get past you? Didn't I tell you that as long as you can defeat me, you can get past me? The giant looked at Lung Ruoxue as he spoke. However, the words "why is your memory so bad" were clearly written in his eyes. There was even a hint of sympathy in his eyes, which made Lung Ruoxue a little mad. You think you can win? Lung Ruoxue couldn't take it anymore and asked. Of course. However, if you want to defeat me, you can't rely on brute force. So do your best. Although you've given me a lot of delicious food, I won't go easy on you. The giant said seriously. When Lung Ruoxue heard this, she nodded her head. After the giant finished eating, it stood back at its original spot and did not move. Lung Ruoxue spent the rest of the time observing. Occasionally, she would exchange a few moves with the giant. However, those few moves would still land on her body without any exception. After many experiments, Lung Ruoxue had discovered a certain pattern. That was, when the giant's body emitted a faint white halo, his strength and rebound would also be the strongest, and this halo would last for nearly an hour before disappearing. Every time the halo disappeared, it would appear again after 3 hours. During this period of time, although the giant's defense was still somewhat abnormal, at least it would not bounce back. However, the damage caused by swords, water, and fire was still minimal. Although this fact made Lung Ruoxue very depressed, it also made her braver. After observing for a long time, she finally noticed a slight difference. It would take about 4 hours for the giant's halo to appear, disappear, and reappear. However, during this period of time, there were more than 10 minutes of blank time. This was because during those 10 minutes, the giant's body had obviously become dimmer. Lung Ruoxue had purposely tested it out during that time, and was surprised to find out that the giant's defense was at its weakest during that time. Not only could she injure him, but she could also not reflect the damage. It was definitely good news for her. However, this also meant that she had to defeat the giant in more than 10 minutes. And looking at the giant's tall and strong appearance, although his defense was low, it would not be easy to defeat him in such a short time. Moreover, the giant would be able to attack at that time. All of this made Lung Ruoxue realize that even though the giant looked simple and honest, he had not told her the whole truth. He was still holding back. However, now that she had found the secret to defeating the giant, she no longer cared about this. After all, if the giant had really told her everything, it would be quite meaningless, wouldn't it? After knowing this outcome, Lung Ruoxue's frustration from before disappeared and she calmed down. After another round of waiting, she finally found the moment when the giant was at its weakest. She was ready to strike. In short, she had to defeat the giant within 10 minutes this time. With this thought in mind, Lung Ruoxue launched an all-out attack. In an instant, a fire dragon leaped out from the tip of Lung Ruoxue's longsword. After circling in the air for a short while, the fire dragon pounced towards the giant. The fire dragon quickly wrapped around the giant and twisted with all its might. The muscles on the giant's arm expanded rapidly as it tried to break free from the fire dragon's restraint. However, the fire dragon twisted the giant tighter and tighter, until the giant couldn't move at all. No matter how hard the giant struggled, he couldn't break free from the fire dragon's encirclement. This fact made the giant depressed, and he couldn't help but roar. Ah! The giant roared and exerted more force in his arms. Lung Ruoxue felt a sharp pain in her eardrums and her heart was slightly uncomfortable. This surprise surprised her. She didn't expect that even though the giant was trapped, his roar could still hurt her. Was this the so-called sound attack? At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue conjured a green phoenix of the wind attribute and commanded it to attack the giant. The beautiful phoenix arrived in front of the giant. First, it used its sharp claws to grab the giant's head. Then it stabbed its sharp claws into the giant's chest. After a few scratches, the giant's body was covered in wounds. At this time, the fire dragon released the giant and imitated the phoenix. At this time, the giant had lost the power to fight back. Under the attack of the dragon and phoenix, the tall giant finally fell to the ground in pieces. They turned into specks of starlight and disappeared. Did this count as her victory? Lung Ruoxua was not too sure. At this moment, the space twisted again. Another giant that was even bigger and stronger than the previous one appeared in front of Lung Ruoxua. This giant was a divine emperor. When Lung Ruoxua saw this, she was extremely depressed. This wasn't the end? This guy's strength was above his, so he was even more difficult to deal with. However, it was fortunate that she had already found the pattern to defeat these giants. Otherwise, she would have vomited blood in anger. When the giant saw Lung Ruoxua, his first words were, "Defeat me and you can continue to the next trial." Upon hearing this, Lung Ruoxua's first reaction was, "More? You bastard." Sung was planning to tire her to death? Or did he really plan to trap himself here for the rest of his life? No matter which of the above options, she didn't want them. However, this giant was obviously more agile than the previous one, and seemed to be able to read people's minds. He turned to Lung Ruoxua and said, "Of course, if you can advance here, even if you can't defeat me, you can still leave. However, if you do that, you will have a stain on your reputation. So my opinion is that you should defeat me." In Lung Ruoxua's opinion, these words were as good as not saying anything. In fact, they even had the suspicion of angering the giant to death. Hence, when Lung Ruoxua heard this, she only rolled her eyes at the giant and did not reply. Following that, Lung Ruoxua laid back down on the deck chair. She decided to rest for a while before deciding what to do. Since this giant wouldn't take the initiative to attack, she still had some time. When the giant saw Lung Ruoxua lying down on the recliner, he found a place to sit down as well. He continued, "Do you still have the food you gave to third brother? I also want one." This guy was really impolite. Lung Ruoxua couldn't help but mutter to herself. Then she smiled and asked, "That guy earlier was third bro? Then are you the second?" Chapter 2105. The Battle with the Three Giant Brothers 3. We are the three giant brothers. If you beat me, it'll be our big brother's turn to receive you. He has the strength of a reverent god, so you have a fight to fight. Hee. After the giant finished speaking, he even laughed wretchedly, as if he was gloating over Lung Ruoxua's misfortune. This caused Lung Ruoxua's mood to deteriorate. It seemed like she wouldn't be able to leave for a while. However, in order to build a good relationship with the giant, she still took out food to serve him. After that, the two of them started doing what they were supposed to do. As the giant ate the delicacies, Lung Ruoxua took out her pill furnace and started to refine pills. After an unknown period of time, Lung Ruoxua had finished refining all the pills she wanted. She raised her head and saw that the giant was still eating. Furthermore, the way he ate was rather elegant. At least, compared to third brother's gobbling, the way he ate was more pleasing to the eye. When the giant received Lung Ruoxua's gaze, he only returned a smile and continued to eat demurely. At this moment, Lung Ruoxua suddenly launched an attack. The giant reacted quickly and leaped up, dodging the attack and landing lightly on the ground. "You're so unfriendly. How could you sneak attack me when I'm eating?" After the giant landed on the ground, he said in a slightly aggrieved manner. However, he did not delay in sending the food into his mouth. Upon seeing this, Lung Ruoxua's forehead was filled with black lines. She thought to herself, "This glutton. Haven't you heard that all is good in war? I just wanted to test your reaction." Lung Ruoxua laughed evilly. However, her heart felt heavy. This fellow's reaction speed was surprisingly fast. It was obviously not something that third brother could compare to. "Are you satisfied with my reaction?" The giant rolled his eyes and asked helplessly. "Very satisfied, continue to maintain it." With that, Lung Ruoxua lay back on the recliner. The giant saw her like this and did not disturb her. He continued to focus on eating his food. However, Lung Ruoxua wasn't really so tired that she wanted to lie down. She was thinking and lowering the guard of this giant. However, it didn't seem to be very successful. This giant was much more cunning than third brother. After the giant finished eating, he turned his attention to Lung Ruoxua and asked in a serious tone, "When do we start fighting? Can we not fight?" Lung Ruoxua asked with a smile. "Of course not. Even if it's just for fun, We still have to fight. The giant replied with a smile. But there's a saying that goes, one who eats others will be short-lived. You've eaten so much of my food. Do you have the cheek to fight me? Lung Ruoxue asked indifferently. These are two different things. Although I ate your food, I can still give you some water. We're even. The giant said. Go easy. How are you going to go easy on me? Lung Ruoxue was a little curious. This fellow actually dared to say that he would go easy on her. Wasn't he afraid of Tsang getting angry? I won't attack. Don't worry, I won't reflect it. The giant said after some thought. But isn't it hard to break through your defense? Lung Ruoxue said in understanding. She could tell that this giant was different from the one from before. Even though this giant had said that he wouldn't rebound, who knew what other strange abilities he had? Then I won't defend either. This should be fine, right? The giant thought for a while and made a decision. Really? Lung Ruoxue asked doubtfully. Hearing Giant's words, she felt even more uneasy. Would things be that simple? She didn't believe that this cunning fellow would be so kind. More importantly, if the giant really did that, wouldn't her trial be meaningless? Thinking of this, she hesitated. Yes, really. The giant promised. When he saw Lung Ruoxue's expression, he laughed to himself. His master was right. He promised not to attack or defend, but his master's future master did not dare to attack. This result made the giant a little proud. However, Lung Ruoxue's next words left Giant in a dilemma. If that's the case, then it's decided. This time, Lung Ruoxue didn't hesitate and spoke directly. The giant was dumbfounded. It shouldn't be like this, right? How did this happen? Why was it different from what he had imagined? What went wrong? The giant couldn't understand. Receive my attack. Ignoring the giant's dazed look, Lung Ruoxue shouted and struck out with her sword. When the sword Qi, which was terrifyingly cold and extremely sharp and contained divine power, hit the giant's body, it did not even leave a mark. Lung Ruoxue could not help but frown at this result. She was certain that the giant in front of her had no defense, but her sword could not hurt him. What did this mean? This meant that this giant was truly invulnerable. Wait a minute. She seemed to have missed something. A light bulb went off in Lung Ruoxue's head. She suddenly remembered what the giant had told her. He said that they were invulnerable to weapons and fire and water. When the giant had said those words earlier, she had thought that he was referring to himself. However, now that she thought about it, he was probably not the only one who had said those words. That was because the giant from before was only immune to her attacks when the halo appeared. However, she was still able to move him at other times. Although he would rebound back, at least he would not be as invulnerable as this one. He wondered if the flames would be of any use to him. With such a thought in mind, Lung Ruoxue decided not to use her sword or divine power. Instead, she would try using fire. A small flame suddenly appeared on her slender white fingertips. The flame was only the size of a fingernail, dark purple in color, and extremely hot. After seeing the flame, a strange expression appeared on the giant's face, and his heart was a little panicked. However, he tried his best to appear calm, but when he saw the flame leaping towards him, his face still showed a trace of crack. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue knew that this flame was most likely his nemesis. Instantly, her heart relaxed. The flame she released quickly engulfed the giant, and instantly ignited a huge flame. After the flames were extinguished, the giant disappeared as well. Evildoer, who was in the control room, turned to look at Song, who had returned a while ago, and asked, "Isn't the constitution of your accompanying guard the same?" Although he knew that some guards were not afraid of the divine fire, he was not sure that there were still some who were afraid. "Of course it's different," Azure said proudly. "Then what's the next one afraid of?" The demon's curiosity was piqued. "You'll know when you see for yourself." Song kept them in suspense and had a mysterious look on his face, causing the people present to clench their teeth. However, they still turned their gazes to the light screen in resignation. At this moment, another giant appeared in front of Lung Ruoxue. However, this giant's height and body size were not as huge as the previous two. However, compared to normal people, he was still considered a giant. After all, he was almost 3 meters tall. Lung Ruoxue had to look up to him. This fact made her feel a little vexed. Why was she so short? When the giant saw Lung Ruoxue, he said directly, "I'm different from second brother and third brother. I don't know how to rebound and am not invulnerable. However, am not afraid of your divine fire, and am stronger than you. Therefore, you must defeat me with your real strength. Otherwise, you won't pass." And his strength was reverent god level. By the way, although your food is very tempting, I'm not interested. The giant added, and his addition also made Lung Ruoxue give up on the idea of continuing with her gourmet strategy. After some thought, Lung Ruoxue smiled and said, "I know that you're a reverent god and am just a puny divine king. It's almost impossible for me to defeat you. So, I've decided to cultivate first. Can you not disturb me?" "Sure." The giant nodded in agreement, and found a place to sit down. Lung Ruoxue continued to lie on the deck chair, and closed her eyes. When the giant saw this, he was a little speechless. He couldn't take it anymore and said, "Didn't you want to cultivate? Why are you sleeping?" "I didn't sleep. This is one of my cultivation methods." Lung Ruoxue did not even lift her eyelids as she replied softly. Upon hearing this, the giant fell silent. However, his gaze never left Lung Ruoxue. He knew that Lung Ruoxue was different from the other cultivators who had been thrown in here by their master. Therefore, they could not treat Lung Ruoxue the same way they treated the others. This could be considered as Lung Ruoxue's special privilege. They had no doubts about this. In fact, it was useless. This was allowed by the master. Lung Ruoxue closed her eyes and regulated her breathing for a while before standing up. Then, her beautiful eyes stared straight at the boss giant, and she attacked him without saying a word. The sword instantly appeared in her hand. This time, she didn't use the divine skill of the fire attribute, but used the wind. The swift and fierce sword chi was accompanied by a cold wind, which turned into sharp wind blades and attacked the big boss giant. When the big boss giant saw this, he stood up calmly and dodged a few times. Several human-shaped shadows appeared on his body, and he dodged the wind blades. However, he did not attack. Instead, he looked straight at Lung Ruoxue and said with a slight dissatisfaction, "Too slow. You can't hit me at all." Lung Ruoxue was a little taken aback by the giant boss words. Could this be the difference in power? She rarely felt this kind of defeat. After all, she could deal with ordinary reverent god-level cultivators as long as she added her own life flame into her divine skill. Although it might not kill them directly, it would not be a problem to seriously injure them. However, the person in front of her was not afraid of her natal flame. Therefore, she could feel the obvious gap between her strength and that of a reverent god-level cultivator. However, it was undeniable that her defeat had aroused her fighting spirit. It was not easy to find such a good sparring partner. Chapter 2106, Returning to U City 1. The fighting spirit in Lung Ruoxue's heart was ignited, and her beautiful eyes that were looking at the giant boss became more and more fiery. Following that, she sat down cross-legged and concentrated on absorbing the spiritual chi in the room. Although this room was used for the trial, the spiritual energy in the room was rather dense. After Tsong brought Lung Ruoxue here, he had specially set up a spiritual energy gathering formation in the room. Hence, the spiritual energy in the room was even more abundant than before. After Lung Ruoxue had calmed down and cultivated, the big boss giant sat down again and closed his eyes. Uncle Long and the others in the control room saw this and knew that Schwer wouldn't wake up for a while. Thinking of this, they all turned their eyes to Tsong. When Tsong saw this, he smiled faintly and said, "Niu won't be able to wake up for a while. Why don't you guys leave first?" Yes. Uncle Long and the others quickly nodded. "I'm not leaving," the demon said coldly. "I'm not asking you." Tsong rolled his eyes at the evildoer and said unhappily. He knew that this guy wouldn't leave, so he naturally didn't include him in the list of people he asked. Then, Tsong moved Uncle Long and the others out of the control room. Bing Yao, who had been waiting in the garden, saw Uncle Long and the others and went up to them excitedly. He said anxiously, "Where's Schwer? Where's that demon? They didn't come out." Uncle Long glanced at Bing Yao and replied, "When will they come out?" Bing Yao could not help but ask, "I don't know, but I guess they won't be able to come out for a while. Senior Tsang has arranged a godly venerable rank sparring partner for Shui. Shui can't beat that guy, so she's cultivating in the place Senior Tsang has arranged for her. Uncle Long explained. I see. Bing Yao was conflicted. What's wrong? Are you anxious? Uncle Long said. Although he didn't know the time ratio of the outside world and Tsang, he knew that even if they were only there for a short time, it would be like a year for Bing Yao. No, I didn't. I'm just a little worried about Qin Yang. Bing Yao said honestly. His junior brother must have suffered in the hands of Wuxia. It was fine if he didn't know where Qin Yang was before, but now that he knew, he couldn't save Qin Yang immediately. Therefore, he felt like there was a kitten scratching his heart, and he couldn't calm down. It's only human nature to be worried. However, since Shui hasn't come out yet, we can't go to the Imperial City to save Qin Yang. You understand? Without that girl, the chances of us being in danger are very high. Uncle Long explained. Although Shui was not as powerful as them, she had a trump card that was much more powerful than them. Hence, she had to be involved in this. If they acted alone and Shui found out, the consequences would be unimaginable. I know. Bing Yao nodded and changed the topic, asking about their special training. After chatting for a while, everyone went back to their rooms and did what they were supposed to do. Time in the God-protecting tower slowly passed. Lung Ruoxue, who had been cultivating in the training room, was not only surrounded by spiritual energy, but also countless spiritual energy that were rushing into her body. The spiritual energy that entered her body moved in a regular pattern, forming a circulation. Wherever the spiritual energy went, the veins in her body would expand, and she would continue to absorb more spiritual energy. Just like that, after a long time, she finally touched the threshold of the Divine Emperor realm. She could finally break through to the Deity Emperor level. In an instant, Lung Ruoxue opened her beautiful eyes. The joy on her face could not be concealed. Although it wasn't a promotion of the heaven-defying incantation, her strength had finally improved after cultivating for so long. This was definitely good news for her. Moreover, the spiritual qi she needed was simply unimaginable. In short, it was a scam. When Lung Ruoxue could faintly sense that the laws of heaven and earth were about to descend upon her, she tried to move the succubus and the other small beasts out of the bangle. With a single thought, countless small beasts appeared in front of her. With one look, Lung Ruoxue was relieved. Ever since the special training began, these little beasts were restricted by Tsang, just like the house. Now that they were able to come out, it was probably because Tsang had shown mercy. When the little beasts saw their master, they pounced into Lung Ruoxue's arms one after another, and started to complain to her. Some of them called her big sister while others called her master. In fact, they were expressing their longing for Lung Ruoxue through their words. The little beasts, who had always liked to act coquettishly, were even acting pitifully. Lung Ruoxue's heart softened as she watched them. Lung Ruoxue touched this and hugged that. Then, she instructed them to find their own places. Following that, the laws of heaven and earth for advancement descended. The law of heaven and earth that was emitting a dazzling light enveloped Lung Ruoxue in a gentle glow. After a while, Lung Ruoxue had completed her advancement, and had the power of a divine emperor. Most of Lung Ruoxue's spiritual beasts were not able to advance in rank this time. However, they still managed to obtain quite a lot of benefits from it. The spiritual qi in their bodies was almost full, and the ones who benefited the most this time were those little silver rats. Right now, the weakest among them was already a 9th-ranked sacred beast. This was something that was impossible in the past. Therefore, they were all so excited that they fell into a daze. He was unable to come back to his senses for a long time. At this moment, Tsang also appeared in front of Lung Ruoxue. Girl, congratulations on your breakthrough, Azure said with a smile. Thank you, he said. Lung Ruoxue said indifferently. Then her beautiful eyes looked at Tsang, waiting for him to continue. She believed that Tsang would not come in for no reason. Girl, you've broken through. Do you want to leave this place? Tsang, are you? And Lung Ruoxue asked for her opinion. I haven't defeated him yet. Lung Ruoxue pointed at the giant boss who was resting with his eyes closed. This fellow was pretty calm. He didn't even open his eyes to take a look when there was such a huge commotion earlier. With your current strength, you can't beat him. Although Nyo had advanced by 1 rank, there was still an insurmountable gap between a divine emperor and a reverent god. In addition, the giant was not afraid of her life flame. It could be said that Nyo had no chance of winning against the giant now. Therefore, it was not optimistic that Nyo would fight the giant to the death now. However, if Nyo insisted on staying here until she defeated the giant boss, it would not stop her. However, it knew that such a situation was unlikely to happen. As expected, after Lung Ruoxua heard Song's words, she confirmed, I know I can't beat him, but if I'm not wrong, it doesn't matter if I can beat him or not, right? Yes. If you're a reverent god now, you'll have to defeat him before I let you leave. However, you only have the strength of a divine emperor, so it's unrealistic for you to defeat him. Besides, I've already said before the special training that you'll only be considered to have completed the special training after you've advanced to the next rank. Of course, if you don't want to go out, that's a different story, Azure said with a smile. Chapter 2107, Returning to U City 2. I'm going out. When Lung Ruoxua heard this, she quickly replied. If she wanted to defeat this giant boss, it would probably take a long time. She still had her senior brother to save and many other things to do. She really didn't have that much time right now. When she thought of this, she asked again. If there's a chance in the future, I'll challenge him again. Is that okay? No problem, if Neo wants to challenge him, any time is fine. Azure promised. That's good. I'll go out first. Lung Ruoxua nodded. All right. Azure laughed as he replied. Then with a thought, he moved Lung Ruoxua and her spirit beasts out. However, he had left out Demon. The place where Lung Ruoxua was moved out was also in their own garden. At this moment, Uncle Long and the others were sitting in the garden and talking about something. When they felt something was wrong, they quickly turned around and saw Lung Ruoxua, who was not far away. Instantly, everyone's faces were filled with joy. Shui, you finally came out. Oh. He advanced. Uncle Long's serious face bloomed into a smile, while Bing Yao was extremely excited to see Lung Ruoxua. Shui, I've been waiting for you. Bing Yao's eyes were filled with tears as he pretended to be pitiful. Get lost. It's only been half a day since we came out. Why did you wait so long? Uncle Long glanced at Bing Yao and scolded him with a smile. It is. The time in the special training area is accelerated, and the time they spent there added together is less than a day outside. Why, after waiting for so long, you're complaining that you're tired? Song Yi, who was in Lung Ruoxua's arms, asked with a look of disdain. Upon hearing this, Bing Yao shrunk his neck and said in fear, It's not bitter, not tiring. I was just exaggerating. It just means that I really miss Shui. My ass. You want Shui to go with you to save Qingyang, right? Song saw through Bing Yao's thoughts and said directly, Hee. I do have that idea, but it's up to you whether we can go or not. If you don't allow us to go, we wouldn't dare to go. Bing Yao looked at Song Dao with a fawning expression. You're smart. Neo has reached the divine sovereign realm. You can go and try to save Qingyang. However, I'll still say the same thing. I won't help you. Azure said with absolute certainty. I know, we'll try our best. Bing Yao said helplessly. However, with Shui-Er's heaven and earth bangle, their chances of winning should be very high. When Lung Ruoxua heard that Song was no longer stopping her, she hurriedly said, Then let's not delay any further and set off as soon as possible. Right, where's the demon? Why don't I see him? Isn't that brat Yi in Senior Song's control room? Why didn't he come out with you? When Uncle Long heard Lung Ruoxua's question, he asked in bewilderment. Song. Hearing Uncle Long's words, Lung Ruoxua lowered her head and looked at Song, who was in her arms. Her beautiful eyes were filled with questions. I came out in a hurry and forgot about him. Cold laughed dryly, then unwillingly moved out the evil that was destroying everything in the control room. The moment Evil saw Cold, it was as if he had seen his enemy. His face darkened and he roared. Damned Song, you actually dared to deliberately leave me inside. I didn't do it on purpose, I forgot. However, the credibility of his words wasn't high. At least, Uncle Long and the others definitely wouldn't believe him. Lung Ruoxue looked at evildoer and Song helplessly. The evildoer made Song so angry that he even ignored her. From this, it could be seen how great Song's ability was. You forgot? Forget your head. No one would believe it, let alone the evildoer. However, he could do nothing to this fellow. In his frustration, he snatched Song from Lung Ruoxue's arms and threw it far away. Then, he stretched out his long arms and hugged Lung Ruoxue tightly. Arg! You big pervert! Let go of my girl! In the distance, Cold's roar could be heard. In an instant, he ran back and faced off with evildoer. This is my girl. The demon gritted his teeth and warned. It's mine. Song was very stubborn. It's mine. The demon didn't give in either, and the two of them were in a stalemate. When Uncle Long saw this scene, he was so helpless that he didn't know what to say. Logically speaking, this man and beast should not be young. But why were they still so childish? All of you stop quarreling. I've said it before, I don't belong to any of you, I belong to myself. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue, who could not take it anymore, roared. Shua! Nyo! Upon hearing this, both the man and the beast looked at Lung Ruoxue with tears in their eyes. Then they said in unison. You don't want us anymore? Then what should we do? Oh, you all belong to me, and am still mine. Lung Ruoxue said calmly. Yes, I belong to Schwerer. The demon was the first to speak. I also belong to Nyo. Azure said, unwilling to be outdone. However, he was a step slower than the demon. After saying that, it shot a provocative look at the demon, and tried to jump into Schweer's arms. However, it was stopped by the demon. After trying a few times, Song saw that his goal was not successful, and simply burst into tears. Ooh, you're too much of a bully. Blue cried with unusual sadness. Those who didn't know would definitely think that something big had happened, but in fact it was only because it couldn't jump into a certain girl's arms. Seeing Song bawling, Lung Ruoxue and the others were speechless. This Song really didn't care about his image. He was a senior expert, why was he acting like a rascal? After a long time, Lung Ruoxue saw that Song was still crying and peeking at her as he cried. She sighed helplessly and could only take the initiative to carry Song. As for Tsang, who had succeeded in his scheme, he immediately broke out into a smile. He even glared at the evildoer provocatively, his face filled with pride. However, the demon miraculously did not get angry this time. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, What are you so proud of? Schwer has always been friendly towards little Beastie, so of course, she's no exception to you. He directly drew Azure into Beastie's range. When Azure heard these words, he wasn't angry or annoyed. In his heart, as long as he could win favor, it was fine. As for why he was favored, there was no need to fuss about it. When Lung Ruoxue saw that the two of them were no longer at daggers drawn, she heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time she hurriedly said, Let's go now. With proper business, these two probably wouldn't go head-to-head with each other. With that, Lung Ruoxue gave Uncle Long and the others a look, then looked at her godfather. When Master Ning received Lung Ruoxue's gaze, he immediately said, Schwer, you can't leave me behind this time. And First Elder, you can stay at home and keep watch. Lung Ruoxue thought for a moment. There had to be someone in the family. After that, she congratulated First Elder on his advancement, and promised to celebrate with him after she saved Second Senior Brother. The Grand Elder knew that he would only be a burden if he went to the Divine Lord's manor, so he did not object. Chapter 2108. Returning to City 3, just like that, Lung Ruoxue, the demon, Uncle Long, Aojia, Bing Yao, the master of the Ning family, and a few beastie left in a hurry. The next day, Lung Ruoxue and the rest had already reached the vicinity of the Imperial City. As they neared the Imperial City, Lung Ruoxue specially dressed up Uncle Long and the others. This time she did not ask Qingju to change her gender. She only took the disguise pill. However, for the safety of her godfather, she asked Qingju to use this skill on him. Seeing his chest, Master Ning's face darkened. Uncle Long and the others simultaneously suppressed their laughter and lowered their heads. but their trembling shoulders revealed their thoughts at the moment. Seeing them like this, the Ning family master's face darkened even more. Swear, as the saying goes, we should share our blessings and difficulties together. You can't just turn me into a woman. I think they should change too. The master of the Ning family pointed at Uncle Long and Aojia. Although he was usually afraid of Uncle Long, he couldn't care so much at this time. When Uncle Dragon and Aojia heard this, they were so angry that they glared at her. Then they looked at Lung Ruoxua pitifully. Their eyes were red as they said, Swear, you can't be that cruel. They didn't want to be women. Godfather, you have a point. It's also safer this way. Lung Ruoxua hesitated for a moment before she replied, ignoring the pleading looks of Uncle Long and Aojia. Even though she knew that Uncle Long and Aojia would definitely be angry if she said this, it was not good for them to watch her godfather's drama. Hence, she could only let them share their blessings and difficulties. Seeing that Lung Ruoxua had agreed, the master of the Ning family was extremely proud and felt more balanced in his heart. However, Uncle Long and Aojia's faces turned black instantly. Then, the two of them glared at the master of the Ning family, wishing they could swallow him alive. However, the master of the Ning family did not care at all. At most, he would be beaten up by them. To be able to turn them into women to keep him company, it was worth it to be beaten up. The master of the Ning family made a face of death. Uncle Dragon and Aojia were furious when they saw him acting like a scoundrel. But then they felt their bodies change. Their chests became higher, their waists became slimmer, and their hips became rounder and more elastic. Sob. They didn't want to be women. At this moment, Bing Yao, who saw two more beauties in front of him, said recklessly, Uncle Long, you guys are so beautiful. Uncle Long and the other two had turned into beautiful women. They were all stunning and had hot bodies. Although they couldn't be compared to Lung Ruoxua, they were on par with Wu Ling. Bing Yao was dazzled and couldn't see anything. He felt that his eyes weren't enough. He didn't know which one he should look at. However, his praise for Uncle Long and the other two infuriated them so much that they started chasing after Bing Yao and fighting him. When they threw the badly beaten Bing Yao in front of Lung Ruoxua, the three of them requested at the same time to turn Bing Yao into a woman. You bastard! She had clearly forgotten about him just now, but this kid delivered himself to her door. Didn't he deserve it? Shwea! Don't! Bing Yao, who had been beaten up, begged with his pig-like face. However, Lung Ruoxua was unable to help him, so who could he blame? Wasn't he the one who delivered himself to her door? When Bing Yao's gender was changed, the only male out of the six of them was the demon. However, no one asked Lung Ruoxua to change the demon into a woman. From this, it could be seen how lucky the evildoer was. In fact, it wasn't that Uncle Long and the others didn't want to make such a request, but they had to consider the consequences of doing so. Not to mention whether the demonic man would be angry. Even if he really changed his gender, he would probably still be like now, flirting with Schwer without any restraint. The moment they thought of the scene of two women, they had goosebumps all over their bodies. Therefore, they had long given up on this idea. The combination of 5 women and 1 man also made the evildoer a happy man in the eyes of others. He attracted countless eyes like the moon surrounded by stars. As they walked along the main street of Imperial City, Lung Ruoxua glanced at the black-faced evildoer and teased. Evildoer, so many men are envious of you. What's there to be envious of? The demon gritted his teeth. He really didn't want his ears to be too good. However, the soft discussions of the people in the city still entered his ears without exception. He was also treated as a descendant of a large family who had come out to gain experience. Of course, what they were most envious of were the few beautiful maids who followed him. Thinking of these maidservants in the eyes of others, the demon's heart was filled with endless depression. At this time, a young man with a wretched appearance blocked their way. He raised his devilish eyebrows and glanced at the man. He said indifferently, "Is there something? I want to buy a maid from you." The wretched-looking man said straightforwardly, "I'm not selling." The demon didn't even think about it. These people couldn't sell it, and even if he did, no one would be able to afford it. When Uncle Long and the others heard the vulgar man's words, they were so angry that their faces instantly darkened. And a storm was about to break out at any moment. However, the wretched-looking man clearly did not take the evildoer's rejection to heart. He even ignored the ugly expressions on Uncle Long and the others' faces and continued. You're alone, so you can't enjoy so many maids, right? Why don't you sell one to me? We can be friends, don't worry. I definitely want to mistreat you. I'm willing to pay a lot of money. As long as you're willing to sell it. How is it? After the lecherous man finished speaking, he began to size up Uncle Long and the others, feeling very good about himself. It was as if he was picking out goods that he liked. He was full of confidence as he waited for the other party to agree. The reason why he was so confident was because he felt that the conditions he offered were very good and would definitely satisfy the other party. However, his lecherous eyes made Uncle Long and the others want to dig out his eyes and throw him into the endless sea to feed the fish. Isn't this too wretched? Uncle Long and the others didn't even need to think to know that this guy was probably thinking about something in his mind when he looked at his gloomy eyes that were flashing with an inexplicable light. Furthermore, it would definitely not be anything good. Just as Uncle Long and the others were about to explode, the demon rejected again. I said I'm not selling. I won't sell any of them. You don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Do you know who I am? It won't do you any good if you anger me. The vulgar man saw that there was no room for discussion, so he could only threaten. I don't care who you are, get lost. Good dogs don't block the way. The evildoer said impatiently. Then they ignored the vulgar man, walked around him, and went straight ahead. If they could, they really wanted to give that wretched man a good beating. However, this was the imperial city, and it was better to be safe than sorry. Therefore, they did not want to cause trouble as soon as they arrived. Otherwise, he would not have let the vulgar man off so easily. Damn it. You will regret this. I won't let you off. As he watched evildoer and the rest leave, the vulgar man was so angry that he started to hop on the spot. However, as he was alone, he did not dare to chase after them. He glared at Lung Ruoxue and the rest for a long time before he left with a face full of hatred. After Lung Ruoxue and the rest got rid of the vulgar man, they immediately found an inn to stay in. The inn they were looking for this time was the largest and most luxurious in the imperial city. The price was not cheap either. Naturally, this inn belonged to the Divine Master's residence. After booking the rooms, Lung Ruoxue and the rest went upstairs. Their rooms were on the 3rd floor and they were 2 adjacent suites. There were 2 rooms in each suite. After they entered one of the suites, they looked at the luxurious decorations in the room and the living room and didn't know what to say. This was because the decorations here were too similar to the Divine Master's residence. That was luxury. It was extremely luxurious. The entire room and living room were gorgeous, with silver as the main color tone. Paired with bright gold, it looked shiny. Although the furnishings inside were expensive, in reality, other than being decorative, they did not help in cultivation at all. Even so, a day's stay in this suite was still sky-high. Little girl, why do we need 2 such expensive suites? It's a bit of a waste. After the master of the Ning family finished looking at it, he felt a little heartache for the money. Damn it, 100 top-grade crystals for a day of living here. Isn't this daylight robbery? Hehe. Godfather, we want 2 suites to hide from people. After all, there are a few of us. It doesn't make sense for all of us to be squeezed into one room. Lung Ruoxue explained with a smile. Little guy, don't mind this little money. We don't lack money. Hearing Master Ning's words, Song Yi said. At this moment, Song's appearance had also changed at Lung Ruoxue's request. It was no longer a Totoro, but a snow-white rabbit with no mixed hair. All right then. The master of the Ning family nodded and immediately felt relieved. After everyone sat in the luxurious living room and chatted for a while, they were about to leave when they suddenly heard a commotion outside. Following that, their room door was opened from the outside. Lung Ruoxue raised her brows when she saw this scene. Was someone trying to cause trouble again? After all, their room was locked. Then, a group of fierce-looking brawny men swarmed in from outside. Chapter 2109. You're very interested in me, one. These brawny men were all tall, strong, and had extraordinary strength. Their faces and bodies carried a murderous aura that was almost tangible. From this, it could be seen that these people had fought their way out of the flashes of blades and shadows of swords. However, it was precisely this group of people that were clustered around the vulgar man they had met on the street earlier. Lung Ruoxue couldn't help but raise her brows when she saw this. She was extremely curious about the vulgar man's identity. She didn't know where this fellow came from to actually have such a subordinate. Is there something? Lung Ruoxue opened her mouth indifferently. Humph. I'm here to find your master, the wretched-looking man said arrogantly. Then he glanced at Lung Ruoxue in disdain. This woman was the ugliest among all the women here. Hence, he did not even bother to look at her. May I know why this young master is looking for my master? Lung Ruoxue asked with a smile. Humph. Where's your master? The vulgar-looking man raised his brows. What he meant was, I don't want to talk to a maidservant. Get your master to come out. However, his meaning was ignored by Lung Ruoxue. Lung Ruoxue laughed in her heart. Wasn't the evildoer sitting on the chair? She actually asked her where her master was? Was this considered a wise advisor? Or was it that all self-righteous powerhouses had their noses up in the air and could not see others? Even though Lung Ruoxue was thinking this in her heart, she did not show it on her face. Then she smiled and said, I'm the spokesperson of my master. It's the same if you tell me anything. You can make the decision? The wretched-looking man said doubtfully. Of course. Lung Ruoxue nodded her head with certainty. However, the vulgar man didn't buy it at all. A touch of disdain hung on his slightly pale face, and he said, Are you even worthy of speaking to me? Get lost. Get your master to come out and talk to me. Or let these beauties come out and say it. You're an ugly monster. Get lost to the side. Don't ever let me see you again. I feel like puking just by looking at you. He was on the verge of humiliating Lung Ruoxue. When Uncle Long and the others heard this, their foreheads were filled with black lines. Their eyes were filled with sympathy for the vulgar man. However, their sympathetic gazes were treated as fear and concern by the vulgar man. When Lung Ruoxue heard the lecherous-looking man's words, she was momentarily stunned. Was she being humiliated? However, was she really that ugly now? Although her appearance had changed greatly after taking the disguise pill, she couldn't be considered ugly, right? At least in her eyes, he was still very pretty. So, there must be something wrong with this wretched man's eyes. As she thought about this, Lung Ruoxue said unhurriedly, You think I'm ugly? Just nice, I don't really like you either. However, if you want to talk to my master directly, I only have 2 words to tell you. And that is no way. You, how dare you? Do you know who I am? After the vulgar man heard Lung Ruoxue's words, he was so angry that he started jumping around on the spot. However, the aura around him was a little weaker. In addition, there were too many people around him with auras that were stronger than his. Hence, he looked like a jumping clown, which was even more ridiculous. When Lung Ruoxue heard his words, she was even more infuriated. You don't have any words on your face. How would I know who you are? You tell this ugly woman who I am. The wretched-looking man pointed to a brawny man beside him. My young master is a direct descendant of the chief steward of the Divine Master's estate. The burly man who was being pointed at said. A look of disdain flashed across his eyes, which was coincidentally caught by Lung Ruoxue. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue smiled without a change in her expression, then said, So you're the descendant of the chief steward of the Divine Lord's estate. No wonder she's still not weaned off milk. Look at you. You have so many people accompanying you when you're out visiting. Is the chief steward of the Divine Master's estate afraid that you'll get lost? You're the one who's lost. I'm not here to visit. Lung Ruoxue's words made the lecherous-looking man's face turn red with anger. However, his aura was indeed not something he could display. Even if he was angry, he was weak and had a low presence. However, men were all prideful. If someone said that a man had not weaned, no man would be able to stand it. Then what are you doing here? Ignoring the vulgar man's anger, Lung Ruoxue pretended to be confused and asked, I'm here to buy people. The wretched-looking man roared. Didn't my master say so? Our people are not selling. Lung Ruoxue said, feeling a slight headache. From the looks of it, This fellow was probably trying to force the purchase. I can't not sell it. As expected, the vulgar man said angrily, his eyes instantly widening. Don't tell me you plan on snatching it by force? Hearing this, the curiosity on Lung Ruoxia's face deepened. You're right. Since you refuse a toast and want to drink a forfeit, then don't blame me for being impolite. The lecherous-looking man was very cooperative with Lung Ruoxia's words. After he finished speaking, he even cast a smug glance at the evildoer who had been sitting on the chair without saying a word. His face was filled with provocation. How do you want to be impolite? Lung Ruoxia continued to set a trap for the vulgar-looking man, guiding him to continue with her words. You'll know soon enough. The wretched-looking man was obviously a little carried away. Then he turned to the brawny man beside him and shouted, Take all the people here away. The vulgar-looking man gave the order, and the brawny men who were standing still immediately swarmed forward, surrounding Lung Ruoxia and the others. These burly men had at least the strength of a god king. On the other hand, people like Lung Ruoxia looked weak on the surface. The most powerful person among them was a demon, but he was only at the cultivation level of a god monarch. As for the maidservants, in order to match their status, their strength could only be even lower. This was also the main reason why the burly men did not take them seriously. In their hearts, Lung Ruoxia and the others should be some young master from a large family clan who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. He must have brought the maidservants out to train and have fun. Yet they had offended the head butler's junior. Who could they blame? Who asked them to be so blind? The burly man had no pressure dealing with them, and Lung Ruoxia and the rest were rather cooperative. They even showed a fearful expression at the right time, and continued to have Lung Ruoxia as the representative. What are you guys doing? This is the imperial city, not a place where you can do whatever you want. Upon hearing this, the brawny men couldn't help but laugh. One of them even said, Hee hee, little girl, since you know that this is the imperial city, how dare you go against the people of the Divine Master's estate? Aren't you looking for death? What happened to the people of the God Lord's estate? Could it be that the people of the Divine Master's estate could be unreasonable? Could it be that the people of the Divine Master's estate could bully others? If the people of the Divine Master's estate had a bad reputation, it would not be good for the Divine Master's reputation. So, as a member of the God Lord's estate, you should be more careful of your words and actions. Lung Ruoxia said earnestly. Upon hearing this, the burly men laughed even more heartily. After all, this was the first time they had met someone who dared to lecture them. After they had laughed enough, they then turned to Lung Ruoxia and said sternly, Little girl, you're quite courageous. Unfortunately, our God Lord's estate is the law of the divine realm. In Yu City, whatever we say goes. If we say one, no one is allowed to say two. Therefore, you can only admit that you are unlucky. Chapter 21:10. You're very interested in me? Alright then. I'll admit that I'm unlucky. Lung Ruoxia spread her hands helplessly. Uncle Long and the others had not expressed any opinions from the beginning to the end. Seeing how Lung Ruoxia was so cooperative, the burly men were stunned. These people were too gutless, weren't they? He's actually so easy to talk to. When they first came, they thought that they would have to do something. He didn't expect that the other party would accept his fate so easily. However, on second thought, this seemed to be expected. After all, they were from the Divine Master's estate. In the entire Divine Realm, there was no one who dared to challenge the Divine Realm Lord. Just as the brawny men were in a daze, the wretched man was a little dissatisfied and directly roared. What are you guys doing? Hurry up and capture these people. The brawny men came back to their senses, and were slightly dissatisfied in their hearts. However, who asked the other party to have such a strong backing? For the sake of the Buddha, they couldn't do anything to the vulgar man even if they were to charge at the chief butler. However, all of them had the same thought in their hearts. Then, someone took out a rope and wanted to tie Lung Ruoxia and the rest up. However, Lung Ruoxia requested, No need to tie us up. We'll just follow you. Upon hearing this, the brawny man who was about to tie the man up nodded and retracted the rope. This was the first time he had seen someone being caught so cooperatively. This would save them a lot of trouble, but why did he feel a deep sense of uneasiness in his heart? He could not understand. Following that, Lung Ruoxue and the rest were escorted out of the room by the burly men. When they reached the ground floor, Lung Ruoxue stopped at the front desk. When the vulgar man saw this, he immediately shouted in dissatisfaction. "Hurry up and go, don't dawdle. Can you refund us our accommodation fees?" Lung Ruoxue ignored the vulgar man's words and spoke directly to the inn's manager. When the shopkeeper heard this, he felt his head throb. He had been the innkeeper of this inn for many years, but this was the first time he had encountered a customer who asked for a refund. After all, this shop belonged to the Divine Master's estate. For a moment, the shopkeeper was in a dilemma. It was reasonable to say that the guest had just moved into the hotel and was obviously going to be taken away by the butler's junior. It was reasonable for the other party to ask for a refund. However, their hotel had no such precedent. At the thought of this, the manager's brows furrowed into a knot. However, Lung Ruoxue didn't care if the other party was conflicted. She only used her pair of sparkling eyes to stare unblinkingly at the manager. Her eyes conveyed the message that if you don't refund the money, I won't let you off. At that moment, the wretched-looking man saw that he had been ignored by Hua Li and shouted again. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and run. You are so noisy. Don't disturb the manager's thoughts. I'm still waiting for his refund." Lung Ruoxue raised her brows, obviously a little impatient. Seeing this, the shopkeeper could only bite the bullet and say, "I'm sorry, miss. We have no precedent for this. If there's no precedent, then set one. We didn't even stay here for a day. Are you going to charge us for free? Could this be a black shop opened by the Divine Master's estate? If word of this gets out, let's see who else would dare to stay here." Lung Ruoxue threatened fearlessly. The moment the shopkeeper heard this, his face turned black. Fuck. He truly admired this little girl's courage. She actually dared to speak such words that would smear the Divine Lord's estate. Wasn't she afraid that her words would be used by others? At that time, they would probably lose their little lives. After thinking for a long time, the shopkeeper looked at the girl who was obviously ready to fight to the death. Finally, he nodded helplessly and agreed. Wu. It was not that he did not want to use the name of the Divine Master's estate to suppress people, but there were too many glorious deeds in the Divine Master's estate recently. He did not dare to do anything. Moreover, this was the main hall. There were many people coming and going in the main hall. Many people had already glanced in their direction, and their conversation could not be hidden from others. Perhaps by tomorrow, the matter of him using his power to oppress others would spread throughout the entire immortal realm. He couldn't possibly kill all of his guests, right? Thus he had no choice but to agree. However, he still admired the bold little girl in front of him. After all, he had served the Divine Master's estate for many years, and had never seen such a bold and presumptuous person. He had gained some knowledge today. The other guests in the hall had the same thoughts as him. Hence, they were curious as to why Lung Ruoxue insisted on paying for the checkout. After Lung Ruoxue and the rest left with the vulgar man and his men, some of them started to ask around. Not long after, the inside story of Lung Ruoxue and the others checking out of their rooms had spread throughout the imperial city. In fact, there were even signs that it was spreading throughout the entire immortal realm. Of course, this was something to be discussed later on. Furthermore, it was definitely the result of Lung Ruoxue and the others' unintentional actions. Lung Ruoxue and the rest were brought to the Divine Master's residence by the lecherous man. They stood outside the Divine Master's residence and looked at the tall buildings that had been rebuilt. She could not help but sigh with emotion. The Divine Master's residence was so efficient. To be able to build the God Lord's manor that Song had destroyed so quickly, it must have cost a lot of money, manpower, and resources. Song, who knew what Lung Ruoxue was thinking, pouted in disdain and transmitted his voice to Lung Ruoxue. That woman is rich. Moreover, she was now a Divine Master. Even if she didn't spend a single cent, this house would be built. However, since I can destroy her house once, I can destroy it again, hee hee. After saying that, Song Huan laughed evilly. Hearing this, Lung Ruoxia's face was filled with black lines. She couldn't help but sympathize with Ripple Mist. What a pitiful fellow. Why was she targeted by Azure? However, she liked this idea. Lung Ruoxia and Song conversed in the dark. From time to time, their faces would reveal an expression of surprise. The wretched-looking man took all of this as her envy when she first saw the God Lord's estate. Immediately, his face was filled with pride. Humph! A country bumpkin who had never seen the world. Today, I'll let you experience the magnificence of the Divine Master's residence. The wretched-looking man grinned. All right, I'll wait and see. When Lung Ruoxia heard this, she smiled calmly. However, she couldn't help but wonder if this fellow could really bring them into the Divine Master's residence. Even the guy called Huang Shou didn't have this ability last time. After all, that guy's family elder was one of the 3 reverent gods of the Divine Master's estate. However, Lung Ruoxia's question was answered very quickly. The vulgar man swaggered through the gates of the Divine Master's estate with them. And the guards at the gates did not stop him. Immediately, she had a new understanding of the status of the chief butler of the Divine Master's estate. It seemed that in the Divine Master's residence, the chief steward's status was obviously above the 3 hierarch. In reality, Lung Ruoxia's guess wasn't completely accurate. The chief butler's position in the Divine Master's residence was definitely not on par with the 3 reverent gods, but he was someone close to the Divine Master, and had some say in front of the Divine Master. Hence, whether it was the 3 reverent gods, the servants, or the guards in the residence, they all had to give him some face. Otherwise, if he was unhappy and tried to make things difficult for someone in front of the Divine Master, that person would be in trouble. It was also because of this that the chief butler had always been able to do whatever he wanted in the Divine Master's estate. Chapter 21:11. You're very interested in me 3. As the head butler's favorite junior, the vulgar man naturally took advantage of his superior's power, and was insufferably arrogant. It was also because he had the support of the head butler that he dared to bring Lung Ruoxia and the rest into the Divine Master's residence. However, the lecherous-looking man still had some apprehensions. Hence, he immediately ordered his men to bring Lung Ruoxia and the others into his residence as his new subordinates. When he arrived at his own place, the wretched-looking man became even more smug. After arranging for Lung Ruoxia, the demon, Uncle Long, Aojia, and Bing Yao to stay together, he brought the master of the Ning family away alone. Upon seeing this, everyone understood that he had taken a fancy to the master of the Ning family. Uncle Long and the others heaved a sigh of relief, but Lung Ruoxia's expression was a little conflicted. Of course, she wasn't afraid that her godfather would be taken advantage of, but she was afraid that godfather wouldn't be able to control his emotions and would beat someone up. I hope godfather can hold on. Shwe, why are we being taken into the Divine Master's residence as soon as we come to the Imperial City? Uncle Long's beautiful face was filled with bewilderment and puzzlement. The way he looked at Lung Ruoxia was also filled with mockery. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxia smiled helplessly and said, I don't know. I think we're at odds with the Divine Master's estate. But then again, this is the second time we've been brought into the Divine Master's estate. I hope it'll be smooth sailing this time. I will. We must have confidence in ourselves. Look, we're so lucky. Someone took the initiative to bring us into the Divine Master's estate as soon as we arrived at the Imperial City. This saved us a lot of trouble. Uncle Long joked. That's true. However, I'm a little worried about Godfather. I wonder how he is doing. Lung Ruoxia asked worriedly. Don't worry about that little guy. I think he's having a good time. Uncle Long guessed. It had to be said that Uncle Long was right. At this time, the master of the Ning family was indeed very happy. After he was taken away by the perverted man, the perverted man did not arrange a room for him, but directly brought him into his own room. As soon as he entered the room, the wretched man revealed his lust and wanted to force himself on the master of the Ning family. However, how could the master of the Ning family let him succeed? When the vulgar man pounced at him, he kicked him to the ground with a roundhouse kick. Then the vulgar man's pig-like howl could be heard. In the room, The master of the Ning family stepped on the vulgar man's back with great momentum. He looked down at the vulgar man with a trace of killing intent in his eyes and asked coldly, "You're very interested in me?" "Yup. A beauty. As long as you follow me, I promise to let you live a good life." The vulgar man was in so much pain that he kept grinning, but when he heard Master Ning's words, he still subconsciously replied, "Hee. I don't want to eat anything nice or drink anything spicy. I just want to torture you, okay?" Although it was a question, the words that came out of the Ning family's master's mouth were unusually certain. Then he grabbed the long black whip hanging on the wretched man's waist and swung it a few times in the air. The sound of the whip came in the air. The long whip immediately hit the vulgar man's body. Suddenly, the howling became even louder, accompanied by a series of light moans. Hearing this, the Ning family's master frowned and whipped even harder. This guy was asking for a beating. In the beginning, the vulgar man only felt the burning pain of the whip hitting his body, but following that, he felt a pleasure that he had never felt before slowly surging up from his limbs and bones. The more force the whip used, the stronger the feeling became. Therefore, after the initial pain, he became excited. Comfortable. Harder. Use more strength. The vulgar man pleaded. At this moment, his screams were more of moans. This kind of treatment was even more novel to him. However, hearing him say this, Master Ning's face became uglier. He didn't expect this guy to be a masochist. His whipping had made a certain man even more excited. This fact made him extremely depressed. After a few more slaps, the master of the Ning family put down the whip in his hand and found a chair to sit down, no longer paying attention to the perverted man who was in a frenzy. As the pleasure on the vulgar man's body disappeared, the pain intensified, and he continued to plead. "Don't stop. Don't stop. Continue hitting me. Hurry up and hit me. Beauty, I'm begging you." The master of the Ning family was speechless. After living for so many years, he had only heard of this kind of person. He didn't expect to see it with his own eyes today. He was also the executor. But after knowing that the vulgar man liked to be abused, he naturally didn't want to let that guy succeed. So he ignored the vulgar man's plea. Seeing that the master of the Ning family didn't make a move, the wretched man's begging became louder and louder, and finally evolved into a painful cry, which was really terrifying. The servants in the courtyard who heard the sound all consciously hid far away, afraid of being affected. Even the servants who had intended to break into the room to save their master dispelled the idea after hearing their master's voice begging for abuse. "What are you guys hiding here for?" Suddenly, an angry shout rang out in the ears of the attendants. The attendants were startled and looked at the owner of the voice. They stuttered, "Head butler, why you're here? I'm asking you why you're hiding here." Seeing the obvious panic on the attendants' faces, the head butler became suspicious. "And nothing." The attendants' hearts trembled, and they were still stammering. When the chief steward saw them like this, he couldn't help but feel angry. Bang! With a single kick, he sent the servant closest to him to the ground. After that, the head butler shouted in an imposing manner, "You better tell me the truth. Head butler, it's the young master. The young master is in the room. We're afraid of disturbing him." An attendant hurriedly said with a look of fear, and his words received the response of all the attendants present. "What is he doing?" The head butler glared at him and questioned him. However, before the attendant could answer, he faintly heard a soft groan from one of the rooms, followed by intermittent sobs. His face instantly darkened. This unfilial son actually dared to cause trouble in the divine master's estate. How many times had he told that little bastard that he could do whatever he wanted outside, but he was not allowed to do such a thing in the divine master's estate? Unexpectedly, that bastard actually turned a deaf ear to my words. It's really preposterous. The head butler, who was burning with anger, strode straight to the vulgar man's room and kicked the door open, shouting, "Little bastard! Why aren't you stopping?" But then he was dumbfounded. Fuck. What was this situation? Why was it that his disappointing descendant was lying on the ground with his clothes torn and his body covered in wounds, while the woman who was supposed to be pressed down was sitting on the chair, admiring a certain man's self-comfort? Chapter 21:12. You're very interested in me? 4. The scene in front of him made the chief steward of the Divine Lord's estate, who had a bright future ahead of him, feel his blood rushing to his head. His head buzzed and stars appeared in front of his eyes. His body trembled with anger. His face turned from black to white, and then back to black. The head butler's chest heaved up and down in anger. After he calmed down a little, he roared in anger, "Little bastard! Why aren't you stopping?" As he spoke, he rushed to the front of the vulgar man and gave him a few tight slaps. Papa! A few big slaps caused the vulgar man, who was originally immersed in his fantasy, to immediately wake up. However, he shouted out of reflex, "Damn it! Which bastard dared to hit me? You're really tired of living." It was your old man who hit him. The head butler was so angry that he felt dizzy. Then, a few loud slaps landed on the face of the vulgar man. The master of the Ning family looked at this scene coldly from the side, and he felt quite satisfied. At this time, the vulgar man was completely awake from the beating. When he saw that the one who hit him was his own old ancestor, he instantly became listless. Old ancestor. The wretched-looking man did not dare to look at his elder's face. He was so scared that his little heart was trembling nonstop. And his voice was as soft as a mosquito. "You useless thing, I'll just beat you to death." The head butler's face was full of disappointment. He raised his hand and wanted to continue hitting, but when he saw the wretched man's frightened eyes, he couldn't wave his hand. He had no choice but to transfer his anger to the master of the Ning family. "Humph! Where did this bitch come from? Hurry up and kneel down." The head butler glanced at the master of the Ning family with contempt, snorted coldly, and said in an imposing manner, "Damn it, his own descendant had done such an embarrassing thing, but this woman was just watching from the side. This matter was really intolerable." However, the master of the Ning family was not afraid of him. Gently raising his eyes, he carefully sized up the little old man in front of him, who was burning with anger. The master of the Ning family lightly spat out 3 words. "On what basis? You." These 3 words almost made the chief butler, who was in charge of the Divine Master's estate, vomit blood. He had been the chief butler for so long, but this was the first time he had heard someone ask him, "Why? Why?" What else could he do? Of course, it was because he was the chief steward of the Divine Master's estate. The chief steward of the Divine Master's estate took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Then he suppressed his anger and said coldly, "Just because I'm the chief steward of the Divine Master's estate, and you're just a woman of unknown origin. What's wrong with the head butler?" Could the head butler be unreasonable to guests? By the way, I'm not someone with an unknown background. I'm a guest invited by your descendant. Master Ning replied with a smile. "Humph. What kind of guest are you?" The head butler's face was full of disdain. This woman was just a woman that his descendants had taken a fancy to and captured. Did she really think that he didn't know? Then I was invited back by your descendants. What do you think? The master of the Ning family smiled, and turned his eyes to the wretched-looking man. When the vulgar man saw the Ning family head's gentle gaze, he couldn't help but nod. Seeing this scene, the head butler wanted to swallow the vulgar man's heart. This damn thing, can it not be so lecherous? Didn't he know that lust was a double-edged sword? He shouldn't die for a woman without even knowing how he died. The head butler's heart was filled with resentment. He glared at the vulgar man with a fierce gaze that seemed to pierce through his body. Unfortunately, the vulgar man's mind was all on the Ning family master, so he naturally ignored the head butler's attitude. When the master of the Ning family saw this scene, his smile became more and more brilliant, and his mood was naturally very good. However, even though he was in a good mood, the chief butler's face was getting uglier and uglier. Seeing this, the master of the Ning family consciously walked to the side of the head butler, patted his shoulder to comfort him, and sympathetically said, "Calm down. Who asked you to have such a disappointing descendant? Of course, if you can be ruthless enough to hand him over to me, I guarantee that I can train him to be obedient and make him turn over a new leaf. How about it? Do you want to try?" What? The head butler was puzzled. What did this woman mean? She wanted him to hand her over? He even wanted to help him train? What was she up to? His heart was in a state of confusion. bewildered by the master of the Ning family. He's basically a piece of trash in this state. Don't you want a descendant that you can be proud of? So handing him over to me is the best choice you can make. The master of the Ning family pointed at the vulgar man. Is that so? The head butler was a little dizzy from the Ning family's master's words, and actually seriously considered the feasibility of this matter. In the end, he hardened his heart, but still asked with some worry, "Who are you? What's his purpose?" "I'm a good person. I don't have any purpose." The master of the Ning family replied with a slight grievance. Hearing this answer, the head butler's mouth twitched. He decided to ignore the other party's nonsense and made up his mind. "If you can really teach my descendant well, then I won't pursue your rudeness to me just now." Rude? Did he? The master of the Ning family didn't understand. When had he been rude? However, he wouldn't argue with the head butler over such a small matter, so he nodded and said, "Don't worry, head butler. I won't disappoint you." When the head butler heard this, he nodded in satisfaction and said, "Then I'll hand him over to you." After that, the head butler patted his butt and left. After the head butler left, the master of the Ning family became a little uneasy when he saw that he had answered his purpose so easily. He glanced at the wretched man, and couldn't help but secretly complain. This head butler's nerves are really thick. He had actually handed her over to him. In fact, it wasn't that the head butler was careless, but that he was too confident in the power of the Divine Master's estate and his own status. He was sure that no one would dare to mess with him, so he naturally didn't think about investigating the origin of the master of the Ning family. Even if he just asked casually and didn't get anything, he still agreed to hand the person over to the master. Moreover, another important reason was that his descendant was really too disappointing. He hated that he could not live up to his expectations, but he could not bear to give up, so he could only try everything he could. If someone could really teach this descendant well, it might not be a bad thing. Moreover, no one knew better than him about his descendant's lecherous habits. Seeing that his descendant seemed to be quite obedient, he decided to give it a try. However, he was too confident and did not worry about the safety of his descendants. It was also because of this that the wretched man's days of suffering arrived. A few days later, "Ow!" The voice rang out in the courtyard as usual. Chapter 21:13. You're very interested in me? 5. When the servants who were passing by heard this terrifying sound, they hurriedly ran away with large steps as if they were running for their lives. Everyone knew that this was a certain fierce woman disciplining their little master. However, after receiving the head butler's greeting, they naturally adopted an attitude of ignoring it. However, this cry was really too terrifying. They were afraid. For a time, the courtyard was in chaos. In the room, Wuxia and the others were also speechless. Ever since their godfather returned with the wretched man a few days ago, and threw him into the room next door, the noise had never stopped. They didn't know how their godfather dealt with the unlucky guy, but he actually made him scream so miserably, as if someone had burst his flower. No, to be precise, it was even worse than that. At this moment, the master of the Ning family, who was obviously in a good mood, pushed the door open and entered. Seeing his expression, Wuxia knew that Godfather was having a great time. However, Godfather didn't allow them to watch, so they didn't know what Godfather had done to that fellow. "Little guy, you're in a good mood," Uncle Long said with a smile. "Of course." The master of the Ning family was proud. "Then, did you manage to get any important information?" Uncle Long asked in a low voice. "I really don't have any. Although that guy lives in the God Lord's estate, he's only relying on his relationship with the head butler. He basically doesn't know anything about himself." The master of the Ning family sighed. Over the past few days, although they had moved into the Divine Master's estate, they did not act rashly. Furthermore, as guests invited into the Divine Master's estate by the vulgar man, it was not appropriate for them to walk around the Divine Master's estate as they pleased. More importantly, their current area of activity could only be in this small courtyard. If they wanted to go out, the guards at the door would not allow them to. Therefore, they knew nothing about the God Lord's estate. Since we can't get anything from him, we can only think of a way ourselves. Uncle Long thought for a while and said, "You mean we should go out and look for it ourselves?" The master of the Ning family asked, raising an eyebrow. But only me, Shui. And that brat you will go out. You guys have to stay here and cover for us. Uncle Long said, "Why can't I go out with Shui and the others, and you guys cover for us?" Hearing Uncle Long say this, the master of the Ning family was not convinced. He also wanted to go out with Shui. "You have to stay behind and teach that unlucky fellow a lesson, don't you? If you leave, you'll be too big of a target." Uncle Long said matter-of-factly, "All right." The master of the Ning family had nothing to say about this reason, and the others had no doubts about Uncle Long's arrangement. Following that, Uncle Long gave Lung Ruoxue a look. Lung Ruoxue nodded her head lightly. Then, with a thought, she brought Uncle Long and the evildoer into the bangle, and left the room with Green Vessel. After they left, the master of the Ning family immediately became listless, and Song also looked listless. Aojia saw this and pouted helplessly. He gave Bingyao a look and the two of them stood up and left the room, leaving the master of the Ning family and Song, who also felt abandoned, staring at each other. In the bracelet, Lung Ruoxue and the other two sat in the garden and chatted. Their destination was naturally Xianyi's residence. Originally, they didn't want to disturb Xianyi this time, but it seemed like they still had to ask him for information. At this moment, Qingju's voice was heard. "Sister, we've arrived at Xianyi's residence. However, he has a guest now, so it's not appropriate for us to show ourselves." "Oh, then listen to the corner of the wall," Lung Ruoxue ordered. Upon hearing this, Uncle Long's face darkened. Then, he calmly listened to the conversation through the light screen. After a long time, the three of them appeared in Xianyi's study. Xianyi, who had just sent Huang Wei off, saw the three people who had suddenly appeared in his study. He immediately asked vigilantly, "Who are you people?" "Old man, it's me," Uncle Long quickly said. "Who are you?" Looking at the stunning beauty in front of him, Xianyi was very sure that he didn't recognize her. "I'm Uncle Long," Uncle Long said awkwardly. He didn't want to find Xianyi before because he didn't want his new image to be seen by his acquaintances. It was too embarrassing, right? Sure enough, when Xianyi heard this, he immediately widened his eyes in disbelief. Then, he looked at the woman who claimed to be Uncle Long with suspicion. However, he couldn't tell that the person in front of him had any relationship with Uncle Long. However, since the other party called himself Uncle Long, he had to treat him with caution. After making up his words, Xianyi pretended to be calm and asked, "Did Uncle Long ask you to come and find me?" He directly ignored the words Uncle Long. "No. I said Uncle Long." Uncle Long rolled his eyes. He was extremely helpless against Xianyi's self-deception. "What evidence do you have?" Xianyi asked cautiously. "Evidence?" Uncle Long thought for a moment, then started to talk about what he knew about Xianyi. He started from when Xianyi stopped wetting the bed, and when he stopped drinking milk. When Xianyi heard this, his expression changed and he quickly covered Uncle Long's mouth. But even so, he couldn't stop Uncle Long from continuing. Chapter 21:14. Saving a Life. 1. Xianyi's face darkened, and the flames of anger in his eyes grew more and more. Uncle Long, who was slow to react, only reacted after a long time. He asked with a serious expression, "Old man, am I right?" Upon hearing this, Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer looked at each other. Then the two of them suppressed their laughter and lowered their heads to prevent Xianyi from being too embarrassed. However, their slightly trembling shoulders still caused Xianyi's anger to rise. Xianyi gritted his teeth and glared at Uncle Long. His eyes were spitting fire as he said fiercely, "You're right. Do you believe that I'm Uncle Long?" Uncle Long said worriedly, "I believe you." Xianyi growled in anger. Then he looked at Uncle Long with curiosity and asked, "Why did you change your gender? Could it be that it's a trend in the divine realm now? Popular, my ass. It's all this girl's doing." Uncle Long pointed at Lung Ruoxue and said in an unpleasant tone, Who was this girl? It can't be Lung Ruoxue." Xianyi guessed, "It's her." Uncle Long nodded. "Why are you guys here so quickly?" Seeing that he had guessed correctly, Xianyi continued to ask. These guys were definitely up to no good. He didn't know what they were interested in this time. We're here to save someone. Leng Ruoxue laughed. Save people? Has Benjio's injuries not healed? When Xianyi heard this, he could not help but ask worriedly. Senior brother's injuries have healed. We're here to save second senior brother. Leng Ruoxue explained. What's the matter? Have you found Master Yes other disciple? Xianyi said with a face full of pleasant surprise. This was really good news. He was in a great mood after the gloominess of his embarrassing matter was swept away. Senior brother Bing Yao said that second senior brother was locked up by the mist, so we had no choice but to come here again. Leng Ruoxue said helplessly. Since they knew where second senior brother was, even if this was a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, they had to come over now. Why is everything that you're doing so difficult? Hearing this, Xianyi was speechless. Was the Divine Master's estate that easy to come to? After they had turned the God Lord's estate upside down, the God Lord was still angry. They, the unlucky ones, had yet to recover from the previous incident. Moreover, it had not been long since the last incident. They did not expect them to make a comeback so soon. Moreover, he knew that since Leng Ruoxue and the others had come to find him again, they must have wanted to find out some information or needed his help. However, ever since the incident last time, Fog River was somewhat dissatisfied with the people in the Divine Lord's estate. Therefore, she had been giving them the cold shoulder and did not give them any orders. As a result, he knew very little about the Divine Lord. Therefore, he did not know if he could help them and was afraid that they would be discovered by Fog River. After all, Wuchen had been looking for the guy who had broken into the God Lord's estate. If Wuchen found out that the Totoro who had destroyed the God Lord's estate was with them, he thought that Wuchen would probably go crazy with anger. Thinking of this, he continued. You've come at the wrong time. Since the last incident in the Divine Master's estate, Wuchen has strengthened the security of the Divine Master's estate. Her own divine sense has also been monitoring every move in the Divine Master's estate all day long. Therefore, now is not a good time to save people. I don't recommend you to act now. But the girl has already made up her mind. She must save her senior brother. So, we can only risk our lives to accompany her. Uncle Long said helplessly. Did you let her come despite knowing the danger? This is nonsense. When Xianyi heard this, he growled angrily. What else can we do? However, don't worry too much. With our strength, it's not impossible for us to save her safely. Uncle Long didn't want Xianyi to boost other people's morale and destroy his own. Therefore, he was full of confidence when he said this. What do you know? The last time you were able to succeed was because of Tsong's help and because of Fog's injury, but now Fog's injury has recovered. By the way, have you come? If it's with you, then the possibility of saving him will be higher. As Xianyi spoke, he thought of that valiant Totoro. However, he knew that Tsong wasn't that easy to order around. Even if he was willing to help once, he might not help a second time. Hence, he didn't think highly of Leng Ruoxue and the others. Senior Tsong is also here, but he won't help us save people. So, we can only rely on ourselves to save Qingyang. Uncle Long said honestly. And you still dare to come? Aren't you guys here to die? If you're discovered by Rhymice, you'll be dead. Uncle Long's truth made Xianyi a little anxious. He was still counting on this girl to avenge Master Yu. If this girl died before she had fully grown up, he would feel the pain. As he thought of this, his gaze could not help but turn to Leng Ruoxue. His face was still filled with worry. When Leng Ruoxue saw this, she smiled helplessly and said, Uncle Xian, calm down. I believe that we can definitely save second senior brother. You believe that? Do you think you can do this just because you believe in it? Xianyi was very angry, but he couldn't do anything to Leng Ruoxue. Especially when he saw the man beside Leng Ruoxue looking at her with a pampering expression. He felt even more troubled. With such a fiancé who doted on his wife without limit, it was no wonder this girl was so bold. He really didn't know what to say. The demon who sensed Xianyi's thoughts glanced at him and said indifferently, With me here, Schwer can do whatever she wants. Even if she wants to destroy the Divine Master's estate, I will help her. I won't let her life be in danger. Upon hearing this, Xianyi revealed an expression of as expected. Then he sighed. At this moment, Uncle Long patted Xianyi's shoulder and comforted him. Since you know that things have already come to this, why bother stopping it? Do you think we won't save her just because you don't want us to? We're only looking for you to understand the situation. So just tell us what we're asking. You don't need to worry about saving people. You're just comforting me. Or are you angry at me? Hearing Uncle Long's words, Xianyi's anger did not subside. Instead, he became even more depressed. Of course I'm consoling you. Oh right, is Wucheng in the Divine Master's estate right now? Uncle Long suddenly asked. Here. Didn't I tell you that ever since the incident at the God Lord's estate, Wu Yan has strengthened the security of the God Lord's estate? Now she doesn't even trust us. Xianyi said honestly. What are your plans? Or do you want to continue staying here? Uncle Long asked again. Of course I have to stay here. I've been here for so long and finally got to where I am today. If I leave just like this, wouldn't everything I've done before be in vain? Xianyi said. He still wanted to stay here and be a spy. Although he didn't know when he would be of use, he believed that day wouldn't be far away. Chapter 21:15. Saving a life too. But didn't Wu Chen no longer trust you? Uncle Long was a little worried. If his old friend's identity was exposed, the consequences would be unimaginable. It's not that she doesn't trust me, but she doesn't trust anyone in the Divine Master's estate. Xianyi corrected. All right. It's not that I don't trust you, but all of you don't trust me. But even so, do you think there's a need for you to stay here? Wu Chen is a lunatic. If she acts up one day and kills all of you, I'll have to collect your corpses. I don't want this to happen, so I suggest you leave as soon as possible. Uncle Long said very seriously. His words were definitely not an alarmist. With Wu Yan's nature, she might really do such a thing. Therefore, he was very worried about the safety of his old friend. I can't just leave like this, especially at a time like this. I have to stay here. Xianyi said stubbornly. You're really... Uncle Long was so angry at Xianyi's stubbornness that he didn't know what to say. You don't have to worry, I know what to do. Xianyi promised. Then be careful. Don't die before we avenge Master you. Otherwise, I'm afraid we'll have to take revenge on you too. Uncle Long said in an unpleasant tone. You old whale, you actually cursed me. Xianyi said angrily on purpose. He knew that Uncle Long was worried about him. However, he truly felt that it would be better for them if he stayed in the Divine Lord's estate. Moreover, he had been in the Divine Lord's estate for many years and his status was quite high. Naturally, he did not want to return empty-handed. Humph. Hearing this, Uncle Long only snorted coldly and turned his head awkwardly, no longer looking at Xianyi. Seeing the two of them like this, Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but tease. Uncle Long, Uncle Xian, you two look like a couple who's having a fight. Upon hearing this, the two of them immediately jumped 10 meters away from each other. They glared at Leng Ruoxue in anger and growled in unison. Stinky girl, what nonsense are you spouting? I just think it looks like it. He didn't say it was true. Leng Ruoxue said with an aggrieved expression. With her stirring things up like this, the atmosphere instantly became much more harmonious. Uncle Xian, we're going into a space in the fog to save someone. When do you think it's best for us to act? Leng Ruoxue asked. Raimai's space? How could you enter her space? Even if we can enter, it's impossible to not alert her, right? Xianyi asked worriedly. He had heard that the rime ice had its own space, but he wasn't sure what the rime ripple was used for. However, after hearing Leng Ruoxue's words, he could already guess that it was a prison created by the rime ice. We naturally have our own ways. So, Uncle Xian, please tell me when the Divine Lord's estate and Rime Ice's defenses are at their lowest. Of course, it would be even better if Rime Ice can leave the Divine Lord's estate for some matters. Leng Ruoxue said with a smile. Wu Chan won't leave the Divine Lord's estate so easily now. Moreover, her divine sense will also pay attention to the Divine Lord's estate's movements at all times. Therefore, It'll be very difficult for you to save her. Moreover, it's also very dangerous for you to enter someone else's space. The worry on Xianyi's face deepened. However, when he saw Lung Ruoxia's confident look, he knew that he would not be able to persuade her. After thinking for a while, Xianyi said, In the morning. In the morning, Wu Xian usually goes into the mountain to take in the fresh air. Only at that time will she not be in the God Lord's estate. However, you must know that once Wu Xian discovers the abnormality in the God Lord's estate, she can immediately teleport back. Thus you don't have much time. Yes, I know. Lung Ruoxia nodded after hearing Xianyi's words. They chatted for a while more before Lung Ruoxia left Xianyi's study room with Uncle Long and the demon. When they returned to their residence, Lung Ruoxia told Master Ning and the others about what she had learned from Xianyi. After Master Ning heard it, he couldn't help but ask, Schwer, how do we enter the Raimai space? Senior brother, do you have any good ideas? Lung Ruoxia turned to look at Bing Yao after hearing what her godfather had to say. I went in with Wu Jing last time. This time, we only have two choices. Either we wait for the opportunity to sneak in with her, or we find a way to break her space. Bing Yao said after some thought. It's not possible to break through her space. The master of the Ning family said gloomily. Doesn't that mean that we can only wait for Wu Jie to go there, and then secretly follow her in? Aojie said. Schwer, don't keep us in suspense. If you have any good ideas, tell us quickly. After listening to Master Ning and Aojie's words, Uncle Long looked at Lung Ruoxia and said helplessly. He knew that Schwer would not ask when Xuanyi Wumin would not be in the Divine Master's residence for no reason. Since she had asked, she must have a good idea. Hearing Uncle Long's words, Lung Ruoxia gave a faint smile before saying, There's a way, but I don't know if it'll work. What is it? When Uncle Long and the rest heard this, they stared at Lung Ruoxia expectantly and asked, I have a little beast. It's good at transmigrating. I can let it try. Lung Ruoxia explained. The little beastie she was referring to was naturally Xiao Budian. In reality, ever since she left the Yin residence, she had completely forgotten about Xiao Budian. She had no idea what Xiao Budian had been up to during this period of time. It was Qingju who reminded her, and told her to let Xiao Budian try to see if he could bring them through the foggy space. Initially, she wanted to let Qingju do this. After all, Qingju had the ability to travel. However, Qingju told her that he could not travel through other people's private spaces. The little guy was different from him. That little fellow did not have as many restrictions as he did. He could really go wherever he wanted to. Furthermore, even though reverent god-level cultivators could tear space apart, this space did not include other people's personal space. Thus, if Xiao Budian had this ability, then there was no one more suitable than him. As she thought about this, Lung Ruoxia shifted Xiao Budian out of the bracelet. Xiao Budian, who had been moved out, was currently curled up into a ball and sleeping soundly. There was even a trace of suspicious liquid flowing out from the corner of his mouth. Seeing him in this state, Lung Ruoxia was speechless. I haven't seen this little fellow for so long. Why hasn't it improved at all? Is this a fox? The moment the little guy came out, Uncle Long was immediately attracted to him. After carefully observing him for a long time, Uncle Long asked in disbelief. As far as he knew, civet cats had long been exterminated in the divine world. However, there was one in front of him all of a sudden. Moreover, he had been in the bracelet for quite a long time, but he had not discovered it. He had to admit that this little fellow's hiding skills were really good. Yes, I am. This little fellow is very naughty and always causes trouble for me. Therefore, Qingju has been keeping an eye on it. Lung Ruoxia said with a faint smile as she saw through Uncle Long's thoughts. Chapter 21:16. Saving a Life 3. I see. Uncle Long nodded. Then he extended a finger and poked the little guy's fluffy body. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This little guy's food is not bad. He ate until he was fat. At this time, the little guy was woken up by Uncle Long. He unwillingly opened his drowsy eyes and angrily bit Uncle Long's finger. Uncle Long's movements were also extremely fast. When he realized that the little guy had the intention to bite, he immediately retracted his hand. When the little guy saw this, he growled in a low voice and issued a warning of dissatisfaction. Yo, this little fellow's temper isn't small. Uncle Long saw Xiao Budian's fierce appearance and laughed. It's crazy. Uncle Long, ignore it. It'll be quiet soon. Lung Ruoxua glanced at Xiao Budian as she spoke in an indifferent tone. Hearing this, Xiao Budian looked at Lung Ruoxua with a wronged expression. Then he ran over to her and rubbed against her, trying to please her. He raised his little head and said in a baby voice, "Sister, you haven't talked to me for a long time." After she finished speaking, her eyes were filled with tears. That little appearance was really as pitiful as it could be. Big sister is too busy. When Lung Ruoxua heard this, she felt a little guilty. In reality, not only had she not paid attention to the little guy for a long time, she had completely forgotten about him. She even asked Qing Ju to look after him, causing this active little fellow to lose his freedom. Oh, then sister is not busy now, right? Can you play with me now? The little guy said with a face full of anticipation. Ever since his relationship with his big sister became better, he had always been looking forward to his big sister being able to play with him for a while. However, this wish had never been realized. I'll play with you when I'm free. Lung Ruoxua promised. Then she looked at Xiao Budian in embarrassment and said, "Little guy, I need your help with something." "What is it?" Xiao Budian looked at Lung Ruoxua and asked. "I need to save someone. I want you to take me through a space. It's a private space. Can you do that?" Lung Ruoxua asked gently. "No problem," he said. When the little guy heard this, he patted his chest with his little paw and promised. With the little guy's guarantee, everyone was very happy. Then everyone praised him, causing this little guy's proud tail to be raised to the sky. The next morning, with Bing Yao leading the way, Qing Ju brought them to their destination. The special space was set up by Wu Yan at the back mountain of the Divine Master's residence. As soon as they entered the mountain, Lung Ruoxua and the others saw a faint light source through the light screen. Needless to say, this was the entrance to the space. However, no one could enter this space except for Wu Ice or those who had been authorized by her. Lung Ruoxua pointed at the source of the light and said to Xiao Budian, "Little one, that's the space we're going to. However, it's private property, so can you bring us in without alerting the master?" "Not alerting the master. I'll have to try. But sister, even if I can do it without alerting the master of this space, you'll have to do it quickly. Otherwise, the master of this space will definitely notice." The little guy thought for a bit and reminded, "Okay, how much time can you give me?" Lung Ruoxua nodded and asked, 3 minutes at most." The little guy tilted his little head and said, 3 minutes should be enough." Lung Ruoxua thought for a moment and said, "In that case, please send me out, sister." The little guy requested, "All right, let Ling cast an invisibility spell on you." After Lung Ruoxua finished speaking, she gave Ling, who was already waiting by the side, a look. Ling understood her meaning and immediately cast an invisibility technique on Xiao Budian's body. After that, Lung Ruoxua moved Xiao Budian out of the bracelet. Xiao Budian took out his bangle and stood outside the light screen. He extended his little claws and poked at the light source. Then he nodded his head and green vessel transformed into dust and attached itself to his body. Immediately after, the little guy leaped into the air and plunged into the light source. Lung Ruoxua, who was in the bangle, could see through the light screen that everything in front of her was white. Following that, a few light sources flashed past, and Xiao Budian brought them down into a tunnel. Big sister were already in. After Xiao Budian steadied himself, he transmitted a message to Lung Ruoxua. "Thank you, little one." Lung Ruoxua shifted Xiao Budian back into the bracelet and said to Bing Yao, "Senior brother, please continue to lead the way." "Yes." Bing Yao nodded and directed Qing Ju to walk straight ahead. After they reached the end, they took 2 turns and saw a door. He said, "There it is. Qing Yang is locked up there." When he said this, Bing Yao was extremely excited. He could finally save his junior brother. Thinking of all the suffering his junior brother had gone through all these years, he felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. Big sister, you only have 2 minutes. At this time, the little guy reminded. They had already spent a minute on this journey, so he was afraid that this guy in front of him would only care about being excited and forget to save them. Then wouldn't they have come in vain? Shuer, let's go out. Bing Yao glared at Xiao Budian before speaking to Leng Ruoxue. When Leng Ruoxue heard this, she nodded her head. Then she turned to Uncle Long and the rest. Uncle Long, the demon senior brother, and I will go in to save them. You guys stay here for the time being. Good. Shuer, be careful. Uncle Long warned. Yes. After Leng Ruoxue replied, she looked at her godfather, who was about to speak, and said, Godfather, it's equally important for all of you to stay inside. We just want to catch everyone off guard this time, so there's no need for too many people to go in. I know you guys go in quickly. We have to hurry. The master of the Ning family suppressed his depression. Shuer was almost like a worm in his stomach. He hadn't even opened his mouth, but what he wanted to say was blocked. Wu. However, at this time, there was really no need for too many people to get involved, so he could only do his thoughts of following her. With her godfather's words, Leng Ruoxue did not delay any further, and left the bracelet with the demon and Bing Yao. After they left, Aojia looked at Uncle Long, who was also depressed inside. Did we follow them for nothing this time? We have nothing to do with this. How can we not be involved? The most important thing is to participate, understand? Uncle Long rolled his eyes at Aojia and said indifferently, That's right. We followed Shuer here because we were afraid that she might not have enough manpower. Since they don't need us now, well, just cheer them on. Why would we come here for nothing? The master of the Ning family would never admit that he had come for nothing. He believed that he would be of use in some way. After saying that, Uncle Long and Master Ningning sat on the chairs in front of the light screen tacitly and ignored Aojia. Aojia, who felt bored, also sat down and looked at the light screen nervously. At the same time, Leng Ruoxue and the other two had already sneaked into the room behind the door. As soon as they entered, they saw a person tied to dozens of stone pillars in the room. Those people were covered in wounds. Some were awake, some were unconscious. A man in black with his back facing them was holding a torture device against a man. After feeling something strange, the man in black turned around and shouted, Who is it? Come out. Because he saw the door that was originally closed suddenly open. When they heard this sound, Leng Ruoxue and the other two held their breaths. Then, the demon conjured a blade of light that was made of black divine power, and flew towards the man in black. In an instant, the man in black's head was separated from his body, and he was cut into two. He didn't even have the time to let out a cry of surprise before he died. Upon seeing this, Leng Ruoxue threw a wisp of fire at the corpse. In the blink of an eye, the corpse turned into ashes. Seeing this scene, the prisoners who were still conscious couldn't help but widen their eyes. Their faces were full of disbelief. Bing Yao couldn't help but sigh. These two guys, one killed the man, and the other destroyed the corpse. They worked together flawlessly. It was terrifying. However, even though he thought this, he did not delay the rescue. He ran to a stone pillar and cut the rope of the person who was tied up with a wind blade. Then he rescued the person from the pillar. The person who was saved looked around warily. Although he felt that someone was helping him, he couldn't see anyone. This fact didn't make him feel happy, because he didn't know if this was the woman's doing. Until he heard a familiar voice. Qingyang, it's me. Seeing Qingyang's guarded face, Bing Yao quickly whispered, You're my senior brother? Qingyang's face was filled with disbelief, and even more excitement, because he still remembered that Wu Yan had told him that his senior brother was seriously injured, and would soon become her captive. Although he did not completely believe Wu Yan's words, this matter had always been on his mind. However, now that he heard his senior brother's voice, he could finally be at ease. It turned out that Wu Qin had lied to him. Yes, Qingyang, we're here to save you. Bing Yao quickly said. You guys? Hearing this, Qingyang was a little bewildered. However, before he had the chance to understand the situation, he heard a woman's voice. Senior brother, now is not the time to reminisce. Hurry up and save the others. Leng Ruoxue instructed. This was also Qing Ju's request. She had even brought out the bracelets for Uncle Long and the others to help. Yes, senior brother, quickly save them. Hearing the woman's words, Qing Yang quickly said. He was so happy that he almost forgot about the others. He really shouldn't have. At the thought of this, Qing Yang quickly ran to the pillar closest to him and rescued the people tied up on it. Uncle Long and the others used their divine power to form a light blade to cut the rope from a distance and save the people on the pillar. Lung Ruoxue then kept them into her bracelet. Chapter 21:17. Injured 1. The rescue operation went very smoothly. However, just as Lung Ruoxue was in the process of moving everyone into the bracelet, she suddenly felt an intense pressure coming towards her. She immediately felt a sharp pain in her head. Following that, she heard an angry roar from afar. You're looking for death. Instantly, her heart trembled. Then, with a change of mind, she quickly brought everyone into the bracelet. The second they entered the bracelet, a red shadow appeared in the room. Slowly, the shadow solidified. Then, a beautiful woman in red with flames of anger burning on her body appeared in the room. This beautiful woman was Wuxia. Looking at the empty room, Wulong's beautiful face showed shock and anger. Damn it. Then, with a wave of her long sleeve, everything in the room turned to ashes. After venting her anger, the anger in her heart did not subside. Instead, it accumulated and her face turned from white to black. Her body was cold and there were countless ice shards around her. The flame in her beautiful eyes instantly turned into a monstrous fire. Damn it. Who did this? Who saved her? Rhyme was filled with anger and hatred. Her anger caused her originally beautiful face to become somewhat distorted. Yes, she hated it. She was furious. She didn't expect that someone would actually dare to save people under her eyes. They really didn't want to live. Moreover, she had rushed back quickly enough, so she believed that the audacious people must still be here. But she did not know where they were hiding. Thinking of this, she closed her eyes and carefully sensed everything here. In the next second, Ripple opened her pair of astute eyes, and a cold light flashed in them. He actually didn't feel anything? How was this possible? This was her own territory. She had created it. She was the owner of this place. Everything here should be under her control. But now, her feelings were telling her that everything was normal here. This was impossible. Wu Jing didn't believe that her judgment could be wrong. Therefore, she guessed that the other party must have used some special means, which was why she couldn't detect it. But what was it? In the entire divine realm, who would have the ability to make him not detect any traces? This was really too unusual. All this while, she had always thought that the divine world was within her grasp. However, now something that she could not grasp had happened in the divine world. She did not even have any clues about it. How could she do this? This made her feel that her authority had been challenged. She would never allow such a thing to happen. However, it wouldn't be that easy to immediately find the people who had trespassed her territory. Moreover, she was very certain that those rascals were still here. She just didn't know what method they had used to avoid her spiritual awareness search, but it was impossible for them to hide here for a lifetime. She was sure that these people would eventually give themselves away. With this thought in mind, she was not so angry and anxious. Then, with a change of mind, she disappeared from the spot. As soon as she left, Uncle Long and the others, who were hiding in their bracelets, heaved a sigh of relief. That woman was finally gone. However, she came so quickly. Fortunately, Schwer had the universal bracelet. Otherwise, they would have become that woman's captives. Schwer, what should we do now? Uncle Long said worriedly. Although Wu Xian had left, Uncle Long believed that she would definitely keep a close eye on this place. In fact, she didn't need to keep a close eye on them at all, because this was her territory. It wouldn't be easy for them to leave this place without being discovered. However, after he asked this, he realized that Lung Ruoxue did not give any response. He thought that Schwer was also trying to find out about this matter. However, after waiting for a while, he realized that Lung Ruoxue still had no reaction. He quickly turned around and realized that Schwer's face was frighteningly pale. Schwer! In the next second, Uncle Long saw Lung Ruoxia's body limply fall to the ground. He hurriedly reached out to catch her, and called out Shui Er's name in a panic. The evildoer, who heard that something was wrong with Uncle Long's voice, immediately teleported to Lung Ruoxia's side, and took her from Uncle Long's hands. Then he checked on Lung Ruoxia's condition before his expression changed drastically. Shui Er is injured. This fact made the demon blame himself. Why didn't he notice Shui Er's abnormality? He was so regretful that he couldn't protect Shui Er in time. When Uncle Long heard this, his face turned ugly. How was this possible? Shui Er was fine before. How did she suddenly get injured? In fact, they could not be blamed for not realizing it in time. Even Lung Ruoxia did not realize that she was injured, and the demon had been arranged by her to help Bing Yao by giving pills to those who were saved. Therefore, it was very normal that no one realized it in time. However, the evildoer was not willing to think that way. He felt that he was too careless and did not protect Shui Er well. Hence, he was deeply in self-blame and could not extricate himself. For a moment, the air in the bangle seemed to have frozen, and the air pressure dropped to freezing point. Looking at the invisible dark qi emanating from the evildoer's body, the calm master of the Ning family sighed, and quickly took out a healing pill for Shui Er to consume. However, Shui Er did not wake up as he had expected, which made him deeply worried. At this moment, Qing Ju, who had arranged a place for the people who were saved, appeared beside Lung Ruoxia. When he saw Lung Ruoxia, who was being held tightly in the arms of the demon, Qing Ju was so worried that his little body was trembling slightly. Sister. Qing Ju squatted down and closed his eyes to feel the condition of Lung Ruoxia's body. When he opened his eyes again, his eyes were filled with tears. His divine sense was damaged. He didn't expect his sister to be so seriously injured. At that time, he only cared about the people who were saved and neglected his sister. Moreover, he didn't expect his sister to be injured. Now that he thought about it, it should be that before Wu Yan arrived, she had launched a spiritual sense attack on his sister. With his sister's current strength, no matter how powerful her spiritual sense was, she couldn't resist it at all. In addition, this was Wu Yan's territory, so Wu Yan's attack was more convenient and silent. Sister. Qing Ju's tears fell silently. His heart tightened as he looked at Uncle Long and the others. He became more and more worried. Furthermore, Shui Er had yet to wake up after taking a supreme-grade healing pill. This fact made them very uneasy. Little brat Yi, you should carry Shui Er into the purple bamboo house first. Uncle Long couldn't help but remind Yi Chun when he saw him in a daze. However, Yi Chun was so immersed in self-blame that he did not give him any response. Seeing this, Uncle Long had to do it himself. Chapter 21:18. Injured too. However, the demon's reaction was so fast that he threw Uncle Long far away. Then he glared at Uncle Long with bloodshot eyes and roared. What are you doing? Shui Er is mine. No one is allowed to snatch it. Little brat Yi, I don't want to snatch Shui Er. I just want you to carry her into the purple bamboo house. You can't just let her stay outside like this. She's still injured. Uncle Long sighed helplessly and reminded him. Hearing this, the evildoer's emotions calmed down a little, but the hostility on his body grew heavier. Uncle Long and the others were so frightened that they couldn't help but feel shaken, and kept quiet out of fear. However, when they saw the demon carefully carrying Lung Ruoxia into the purple bamboo house, they heaved a sigh of relief. However, when they saw the demon's appearance, they became even more worried. Bang! The door of the purple bamboo house was slammed shut. Uncle Long, the master of the Ning family, and Audiobook looked at each other, then shook their heads and sighed at the same time. Although they were also worried about Shui Er, it was obvious that the evildoer did not want them to disturb her, so they had to stay outside. Sister. At this moment, Qing Ju, whose face was covered in tears, finally reacted. He was about to enter the purple bamboo house to accompany his sister when Uncle Long hugged him. Release me. I want to accompany big sister. Qing Ju roared in anger. Little guy, you can't go in. Let them be alone for a while. Uncle Long comforted Qing Ju, who was kicking him. On what basis? I also want to accompany big sister. Upon hearing this, Qingju could not calm down. Instead, he became even fiercer. He also wanted to be with his sister. Only by being with his sister would he feel at ease. Otherwise, he had no other way. Sop. Sister. Qingju cried out painfully in his heart. Self-blame made him feel very uneasy. He knew that his sister's situation was very critical at this time, so he wanted to stay by her side. His sister also needed him. However, these people did not allow him to enter. Why was that devilish man the only one who could accompany her sister? Qingju felt extremely unbalanced. Furthermore, this was his territory. As long as he wanted to enter, no one could stop him. With this thought in mind, Qingju immediately disappeared from Uncle Long's arms. Looking at his empty arms, Uncle Long was helpless. He knew that the little fellow would not listen to him, but he did not think that the little fellow had the ability to be a third wheel. Sure enough, the next second, Uncle Long saw the door of the purple bamboo house being flung open. Then, an object was thrown out from inside. After drawing a beautiful arc in the air, the object fell into the pool under the waterfall with a bang. He didn't need to look to know that it was Green Vessel. Then, they saw a wet little doll climb out of the water and disappear in front of them. Then, another object was thrown out of the purple bamboo house. This time, the object landed on the ground freely. Uncle Long and the other two saw this and their hearts tightened. They could not help but worry for Qingju. It would not hurt if it fell into the water, but how painful would it be if it fell on the ground? Oh, artifact spirits would also feel pain, right? Just as they had expected. Qingju was already badly battered from the fall. However, he was still unyielding and persevered in his desire to continue entering the purple bamboo house to accompany Lung Ruoxue. This cycle repeated again and again, but Green Vessel still did not succeed. Uncle Long and the others went from being worried at first to becoming numb. In the end, they could only helplessly sit on the stone chairs closest to the purple bamboo house and wait for news. They were surrounded by countless beasts who were also worried about Lung Ruoxue, but not as bold as Qingju. However, the deep worry in their eyes was the same. At this moment, Bing Yao, who had heard the news of Lung Ruoxue's injury, also came to the purple bamboo house. However, he did not dare to enter. Qin Yang was with him. How is junior sister? Qin Yang couldn't help but ask softly. He saw that all the people and beasts present were looking in the direction of the purple bamboo house, without saying a word. The atmosphere was frighteningly heavy. He was worried and scared. He was worried about the injuries of this junior sister that he had never met before. And the one he was afraid of was naturally Yi Chun, that guy who could explode at any time. He didn't dare to imagine if something really happened to junior sister. Would the mistress of the dark world destroy the entire divine realm in a rage? No. It should be the entire world. He had already heard from his senior brother about the Dark Lord's feelings for this junior sister. However, no one or beast was willing to answer his question. Baby and the other beasts who had followed Lung Ruoxue for the longest time were glaring at him with an unfriendly look, as if they were looking at an enemy. Qin Yang's heart trembled when he saw this. He knew that he was taking his anger out on them. These little beasts blamed junior sister's injuries on him. Although he felt a little aggrieved, he knew that his junior sister had been injured because she had tried to save them. He could not deny this. Therefore, it was only natural for her to vent her anger on him. Therefore, not only did he not dare to show any dissatisfaction, he had to endure it. At this moment, a strong suction force appeared on Bing Yao and Qin Yang, and they were dragged into the purple bamboo house uncontrollably. As soon as they entered, the two of them saw the demon's back facing them. His eyes were glued to Lung Ruoxue, who was lying on the bed. The frighteningly cold aura from his body made them shiver uncontrollably. The cold temperature could freeze people at any time, and the entire purple bamboo house seemed to have entered a severe winter. The two of them had just stood still when they heard the evil demon's cold voice. If anything happens to Schwerer, those people will all be buried with her. The demon said coldly. He wasn't asking for their opinions, but merely informing them. Upon hearing this, the two of them were shocked. Was this guy planning to start a massacre? Moreover, although the evildoer didn't say it explicitly, they knew who he wanted to bury with. It was undeniable that the mistress of the dark world was angry at those who were saved. After hesitating for a while, Qin Yang couldn't help but whisper, "Mistress of the dark world, can you let them go?" As soon as he said that, Qin Yang immediately felt the temperature around him drop by quite a bit. Instantly, his heart began to tremble involuntarily, but he still mustered his courage and forced himself to look straight at the demon. The demon's back was facing them the entire time. "What do you think? If I didn't save you and them, how would Schwer be injured? Therefore, if Schwer did not recover, they would all die. All of them added together can't compare to my Schwer's life. As for you guys, I won't let you off either. However, I won't kill you. After all, you are Schwer's senior brothers." The demon's voice was filled with the smell of blood. In fact, if anything had happened to Schwer, he would have wanted to kill these two culprits. However, he knew that Schwer would not want him to kill his senior brother. Therefore, he had no choice but to let them live. Although he was angry, he hated himself even more. He always said that he would protect Schwer's safety and would not let her life be in danger. However, at the critical moment he had still hurt Schwer. This fact made him blame himself indescribably. He had never felt this kind of feeling before. It was really very uncomfortable. His heart was also in pain. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.